Okay, I will. Well, that's the first
agenda is in the cup. It's in the cup.
It could
So it's not like a Christmas Eve party, it's an all day. Well, I would have been there, I'm not in the neighborhood, but I like the next invitation, I love the parties.
Testing, testing, testing. I think we're up and going. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to this lovely space in our community. The Metro Mall is a major asset in our community that we definitely want to preserve and protect. My name is Ramona Taylor Williams, and I am the Executive Director of Mississippi Communities United for Prosperity. We have been in existence since 2017, and we started out as North Montgomery Citizens United for Prosperity in a small town north of Jackson called Duck Hill, Mississippi. Yes. So that's where we got our birthing, that's where we're rooted. Our work is primarily centered up in the rural communities, but I live in Jackson, and it is only just appropriate for us to do what we do in order to improve our quality of life here in Jackson for everyone. So I want to say thank you for coming out and spending the time with us, spending the day with us. Hopefully it is going to be very beneficial and worth your time and effort. We're going to have a robust discussion around banking, around how banks can work with communities, communities can work with banks, and under what's called the Community Reinvestment Act. I'm a little bit fogged. I lost my sister, my last sibling, on February the 26th, and we sent her home, originally from Peoria, Illinois. My family is from Mississippi, of course. And we sent her home to be with the ancestors, our parents, brothers, they're all gone, and on Saturday. So this is a little grieving time for me right now, but being in community, being with my extended family in this room, it is really just a blessing, and I just want to say thank you for coming. I am going to, we're going to open up now. Of course, we open all of our meetings with prayer, and I'm going to ask Reverend Anderson if he will lead us in prayer this morning.
Everyone bow your heads, please. Dear God, our Heavenly Father, we come, O Lord God, as a unit. And Father, we ask that you would shower your blessing down upon us. And Lord, we ask that we brainstorm, Lord, that you would give us an understanding of what you would have us to do and the way that you would have us to go. Bless us, Lord, and keep us. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. And I am going to ask MCUP's board chair to come up and do the welcome and to welcome you into the space. Chanel?
Good morning, everybody. I don't know about you, but I'm very excited to be here. As Ramona stated, I am the board chair for MCUP. I'm also vice mayor for Duck Hill, our little small town. We are in two locations. We're in Duck Hill and we're here in the Jackson. So she's covering the south and I'm covering the north. So, but we are very excited for today. Today is a beginning for us to collaborate, to come together, to find ways where nonprofits and bankers and other organizations can come together as one. And we're just excited today. And we know that once you leave here, that you will have a better knowledge of what MCUP is all about. Because we represent a lot of different areas. Some of them we sometimes, I don't even know, from being in two different locations. On our end, we deal a lot with youth, and on this end, it's more or less like kind of like on the politics side. But we come together in the middle. So like she said, we started out in 2017 with just a conversation. And through that conversation, we started MCUP, and it's basically was the two of us and one other, and we have been running ever since. I hope that you all will enjoy being here, and as much as we would be of having you here. So with that, I hope that you are welcome. And later on, we're gonna do a little something to get y'all to moving and stuff, what we do best, because you all kind of quiet right now. Some of you full of coffee and not ready to get up, so we're gonna wake you up in a little bit so that y'all can get excited about what we're doing. Again, you are welcome.
Okay, before I forget, I want to introduce MCUT's team. So if our team could please stand up or wave your hand or whatever, so folks will know who you are, who we are, who they can reach out to when we get into the breakout sessions and everything like that. Mercy grew up in MCUT. She's been in our youth program. She was in our youth program. Well, all the MCUT kids stand up, please. I know I've seen 3 of you. Taya, and we have one more here. Mercy started with us and she was going into the 8th grade. She graduated last year on March the 10th from Alcorn, cum laude, with her bachelor's in biology, and she is now in a PhD program at Jackson State. And Jataya, she's been with us since, what, 5th grade, 4th grade? Jataya, she's now,
I'm now a senior in high school.
So we really center our work around youth, youth empowerment, youth leadership development. We were funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in 2019, worked in partnership with Urban Institute and Community Science, and we developed an intergenerational leadership development model for around resiliency. Our work really centers in the environment and in resiliency, and our primary mission is to create healthy, thriving, and sustainable communities, and communities that have been traditionally excluded from decision-making, from processes, from equitable policies, and investment. And our goal is to bring the resources to bear so that the residents in those communities can create the communities that they want to live in. So our agenda is pretty robust. It's going to be pretty packed, so I'm not going to keep on going. But the agenda is up here, and we also have a QR code where you'll be able to follow the agenda on your phones. We're going to start out, the agenda did change a little bit. We do really high-level work, and we would not be able to do this work without having strategic partners. And we have phenomenal partners at the national level and also locally. And so one of our partners is the Build Design, New York Build Design. And so it just so happened on yesterday, they sent me an invitation to participate in a webinar on yesterday around CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act, and also using it as a tool for infrastructure. We do a lot of work in that space because our work centers on mitigating flooding issues. Duck Hill, that's why we started in Duck Hill. Duck Hill used to flood profusely. And we brought together some resources. We were fortunate to receive $300,000 to do a green and gray infrastructure project, and that was, my husband designed the system, and the town of Duck Hill, which was his last project. We lost him on April the 15th of 2022 to stage 4 cancer. And his last project was he stopped the town of Duck Hill from flooding. It no longer floods. Of course, we have major flooding issues in the city of Jackson. Many of you know and have heard about the controversial One Lake Plan. We have been very much involved in that, looking at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. There what's called the DEIS, the Draft Environmental whatever it is, statement. I'm tired, John. And we worked with 3 communities in Northeast Jackson, and to help them to organize around this issue of flooding. Their communities flood really bad, the issue of flooding, and bringing them the resources that they needed in order to challenge the Army Corps of Engineers and to put forth informed comments. So we're very much involved in that space. So the webinar on yesterday was just so appropriate and apropos for the event that we're having today. And I did not have time to put my PowerPoint presentation together. And it just so happened that the presentation that they used on yesterday is exactly what we need for today. So I reached out, I asked Joy if they would if they would present, and they said yes. So we kind of switched the agenda around a little bit, and that's my part, and she may be, I don't know if she signed in yet.
Would it be helpful if I share my screen right now?
And so while Albert is getting those things done, I just want to lift up a young lady that just when I needed to have someone, because after my sister passed, I said, oh, I can't pull this off, never say can't. I just did not know what to do. We were already into the planning part, and first one thing and the other, and so, but then I was introduced to this young lady right here, Asia Wiggins. And we met, we had lunch, I told her the situation that I was in and what was going on. She stepped right up and right in, and she just was my angel. She just took it all. She just took all the weight, so let's give her a hand. And I also want to introduce our co-host, who is Mr. Rico Wells. Rico Wells is with Community Bank. He has been a part of MCUP since its inception. He was with State Bank at that time, and he sat on our Forrester Board of Directors. So Rico, and he is, Community Bank is co-sponsoring with us today. You ready?
I'm trying to get the Bluetooth for the speaker.
I'm here, ready to go. Can you hear me? Can anybody else in the chat hear me?
We can hear you. I'm trying to get you to the bigger speakers
You
in
can
the
hear
room.
me okay? Okay. Can you give me permission to share my screen?
Sure.
Thank you. Then I can go ahead with it. Okay. Last question. Can you guys see that okay? Everybody in the room. Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up from John. Thank you. All right.
I need to bring that mic.
Am I good to start?
Hold on one moment. I'm bringing,
Okay,
I'm
you
having
just
to
leave
bring the mic over to this. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. All right, so hi everybody. Thanks for having me. It's nice to call in. I'm calling in from New York City. My name is Joey Zhang. I'm project manager at Rebuild by Design. Thank you for the intro, Ramona. And we at Rebuild by Design work locally, nationally, and internationally with communities, leaders, and governments to implement climate infrastructure policies and projects. And we bring this approach all around the world, primarily in 3 ways. And so some of the ways are large-scale regional design competitions, and beyond competitions, we work directly with communities to develop and implement localized strategies and innovative processes to address city challenges. And we also do research and policy. So what is the Community Reinvestment Act? I'm sure many people are familiar, but it's a 1977 law that encourages banks to meet the credit needs of the entire community, particularly low and moderate income neighborhoods to combat that fight. So it's traditionally been used in affordable housing and small business development, But today we want to talk a little bit about how it can be applied and leveraged for community-wide infrastructure. And so what's the CRA got to do with community-wide climate infrastructure? So again, as I mentioned, traditionally the CRA has been used for affordable housing, small businesses, community development, and there's really an opportunity to expand it beyond this for community-wide infrastructure. Qualifying activities such as flood control, for example, stormwater systems are eligible under existing regulations and are all ways to support LMI communities. And we really want to pitch this as a way to offer both banks and communities. It's a mutually beneficial opportunity to protect your communities and protect assets. And who benefits from community-wide climate infrastructure that protects against disasters? We all do. So this is called our Atlas Accountability Map. I can send the link later in the chat. And it basically shows where federal disasters have been happening around the U.S. And where post-disaster assistance obligations are for every county in the U.S. So you can look it up on our site later. You can type in your address or like point and click around the map. And we found that 99.5% of congressional districts have faced at least one federally declared weather disaster since 2011. So it's a big number, almost everybody. And this leads us to our point, everybody needs to be protected from extreme weather disasters because extreme weather is linked to financial risk. Whether you're a household within a neighborhood or a bank that operates within that neighborhood, there's a neighborhood or a physical asset that will be affected by extreme weather at some point. So CRA investments offer an opportunity to reduce risk exposure for banks and communities in the very neighborhoods that need to be protected. And again, protecting communities is protecting assets. So according to the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank and Professor Jesse Keenan, who worked on this research, 57% of disaster-declared U.S. counties are CRA eligible. And according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, every $1 invested in resilience preparedness saves $13 in avoided damages in cleanup and $33 in avoided economic losses. So together, banks and community-based organizations can use the CRA together to shift investment from reactive post-disaster recovery to proactive community-informed infrastructure that stabilizes assets, reduces risks, and strengthens local economies. And again, there's a real opportunity to leverage it under qualifying activities such as floodwater control, stormwater regulations. The argument can really be made for how community-wide infrastructure protects low to moderate income communities while also being eligible under existing regulations. And the strategy is really to get community-based organizations and banks to work together. So if you're thinking, where do I start from here? We created a CRA guidebook for community-based organizations. That's the one that's left there. We want to equip them with knowledge to engage banks and regulators to support community-wide infrastructure investments. We also created a CRA guidebook for banks, the orange one on the right there, which is aimed to help institutions strategically direct their CRA investments towards projects that strengthen community-wide infrastructure in LMI communities. And you can find them both on our site, including the Stimpy link, and again, these are links we can send out afterwards too. And now I'll go over a little bit of the community guidebook. So the point of creating this CRA community guidebook is really to create a visually accessible tool that, one, demystifies the CRA process, two, helps community-based organizations learn how to leverage CRA to fund community-wide infrastructure, and three, develop strategies to build relationships with both financial institutions and community stakeholders. And with our partner Regions Movement, we had held workshops and local community members in both Denver and Charlotte helped us get a little bit of a better understanding of like what types of community climate infrastructure they wanted to see in their neighborhoods. So we had folks talk about what they loved about their local neighborhoods or parks, places they loved about their neighborhoods or wanted to be improved. That's just as an example. And develop these principles for resilient communities on what types of investments folks wanted to see in their neighborhoods. So you can see here people said things like public spaces or infrastructure that is accessible to both youth and the elderly to fully live a safe and fully participate in community life. And this is clearly a non-exhaustive list, just based off of like what we found in our workshops, but this is what we got through feedback and is an example of how to envision different principles with community members that people might want to use CRA towards. And this is important because community members have a say in the CRA evaluation process. So there's a public commenting period where community organizations and individuals can review and provide feedback on how a bank is serving its low to moderate income communities. And this will all is part of influencing a bank's CRA rating. And we wanted to lay out clearly some ways that orgs can take action and utilize CRA for their benefit. So in addition to that evaluation and public commenting period, here's a few different ways CBO can engage with banks and work together on the CRA. And on the left side here, that purple square, you can see it's more of the relationship building piece. So we call it our engaging key stakeholders. So using your voice and relationships to shape how banks can support community-wide kind of infrastructure by showing up in these public processes, like public commenting, influencing policy, and ensuring that your community priorities are recognized. And on the right side here is more about how to fund a project, so turning your community visions into client projects through strategic partnerships by connecting and partnering with financial partners who might be able to bring resources to the table. This slide is very text heavy, I will say, so again, you can send this out after a presentation, but just wanted to break down to both banks and communities on what activities banks might already be doing to support LMI communities. It could be a lot, and how these activities might be able to be expanded even further to protect communities against extreme weather, while also accounting for CRA credit. So I'm going to breeze through this for time purposes, but some example of what qualifies under CRA is categories like affordable housing, community services, economic development, revitalization and stabilization. And to support CBOs on this, we've also created a cheat sheet here to help community organizations understand how to speak some of that same language as banks that they might resonate with while talking about investments in resilient community-wide infrastructure. Next, we want to talk more in detail about what community-wide infrastructure is. I know I've been dropping that word a lot. And what types of projects are we suggesting CRA could be used for? So some of this has been done. Most of it is speculative, I'll say. But I do want to start with, we define community-wide infrastructure as neighborhood to large-scale projects that reduce risks of extreme weather hazards and sea level rise while supporting everyday well-being. So, for example, a park that captures rainwater during flood event also serves as a community space in the everyday. Or an energy power plant that doubles as a ski slope. Or a parking garage that also keeps water out as flood protection. Or a playground that serves as a way to hold water when it floods. A hotel or office building that also is able to generate energy. In our community guidebook, we break down these types of projects by scales of investment or project scale from small, medium to large projects. So small scale projects, the household and small business scale. This is an example where CRA has been used for these types of projects before. Medium scale, neighborhood to organizational level, public facilities like resilience hubs that can support during emergencies and long-term resilience. We haven't seen CRA been used for this before, but we are providing these as like aspirational examples of ways it could be used. And then large scale, community-wide to city-wide infrastructure projects also has not been used before. These are speculative projects that could be used for CRA, but I just want to share some examples of what has been done to jot some inspiration. So after Hurricane Harvey, for example, as a small-scale infrastructure example, banks in Texas directed CRA-eligible investments towards initiatives that helped small businesses and improved mobility for LMI individuals. So in Houston, banks partnered with Good Fund, which is a CDFI, and provided microloans, community outreach, and technical assistance to small businesses impacted by the storm. They mobilized more than $1 million in emergency funding to assist small businesses navigating the aftermath of loss and disruption due to the flooding tragedy. And the funding was made possible through contributions from Wells Fargo, Methodist Healthcare Ministries, an amalgamated group of people, and support 2 new recovery efforts under Lift Fund's Hill Country Disaster Recovery Initiative. And these programs include emergency grants of up to $10,000 and also provide zero interest loans designed to stabilize and restore business operations. And in Dallas, as another example, CRA motivated grants supported on the ground lending, another CDFI, which offered low cost, low interest vehicle loans through its disaster mobility program. So helping LMI residents regain access to transportation essential for work, healthcare, and rebuilding efforts. So I just wanted to show these two as examples to illustrate how CRA can be mobilized in disaster context to meet urgent community needs and foster recovery. At the medium scale, these are speculative, but resiliency hubs are a good example of this scale. So multi-use facilities for community gatherings offering a range of services, which can include shelter, charging stations, cooling, backup power, water, etc. You might be able to think of a few examples in your own community. But on the left here is a partner that we work with often. They're called the Eastside Community Network's Stoudemire Resiliency Hub in Detroit. And then on the right here is an example of like a green schoolyard or park, so spaces that can be adapted from school for flood mitigation and additional community support. So just two medium scale infrastructure examples as things that might be able to benefit from CRA. And finally, at the large scale, I want to speak to some projects that Rebuild by Design has worked on. So post-Hurricane Sandy, in collaboration with New York City, this is called the Big U proposal. It was developed to protect Lower Manhattan from floodwaters, storms, and other impacts of a changing climate. So the Big U calls for a protective system around the low-lying topography of Manhattan, so you can see here. It's a 10-mile protective ribbon of parks that actually wraps around that low-lying part of Manhattan, incorporating flood defenses, and as well as everyday community desired amenities for people to use in the everyday. An example of what this looks like in real life. Another example is the Living Breakwaters competition concept, and it was conceived to connect the physical, social, and ecological resilience. So you can see here like a lot of like holistic definition of resilience. The proposal envisioned a necklace of offshore breakwaters that would reduce risk, revive ecologies, and connect residents and educators to Staten Island's southeast shoreline. So a similar strategy on this project as well. And in New Jersey during Superstorm Sandy, 80% of the city of Hoboken was flooded with an estimated 500 million gallons of coastal storm surge, and many areas of Hoboken were without power for weeks. So in partnership with the city of Hoboken, we designed a coastal defense strategy called Resist, Delay, Store, Discharge to protect the city against storm surge and flash floods, enhancing community resilience to climate-driven hazards. And we've created a self-guided tour that talks a little bit more about this. It highlights these resist, delay, store, discharge solutions that manage stormwater at every level, showing how an urban center can really thrive despite intensifying extreme weather threats. Again, you can learn more about this. All this information is located on our site. So finally, I want to end with just some key takeaway recommendations for both community-based organizations and banks on how to best utilize a CRA for extreme weather. So for CBOs, one is act before disaster strikes. Utilize the CRA as a tool to support pre-disaster investments that reduce harm in CRA-eligible low to moderate income communities. Two, partner with banks to leverage project funding. So build relationships with banks, CDFIs, and trusted intermediaries who may be able to unlock capital and technical resources. Three, share your priorities, your community priorities during public comment periods to shape these CRA investments together. So strategically leveraging these opportunities such as the public comment period, which will influence bank evaluation cycles, mergers, expansions, etc. Four, use language banks resonate with. Communicate in a shared language about community-wide infrastructure goals, such as thinking about how can you use risk, assets, compliance, long-term community stability, things that banks will also resonate. For banks, we recommend reducing risks and protecting assets while also being able to receive CRA credit. Invest in community-wide infrastructure to safeguard your assets from extreme weather while also strengthening the communities where banks are doing business. Two, invest in community-wide infrastructure under the existing CRA guidance. Banks do not need new regulations to support community-wide infrastructure. Three, partner with community-based organizations to invest effectively. So CBO's on-the-ground expertise and trusted relationships can help banks target their CRA investments to be most effective, to reduce risks, protect assets, and strengthen neighborhoods when disaster strikes. Communities are the experts on this. And four, complement public investments with bank investments. As the need for infrastructure dollars grows, CRA investments alongside public funding can really help advance critical infrastructure projects, earn CRA credit, and reduce risk exposure for everybody. And with that, I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Joy, I just want to say, oh my God, you, having partners and established relationships. I participated in a convening in Durham at a partner organization there, and that's where we met. And at that time, we were right in the heart of our challenge on the with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and their DEIS and the One Lake Plan and all of that stuff. And so their focus just tied right into the work that we're doing here in Jackson. And we've done some incredible and remarkable work around that body of work, looking at alternatives to the proposed One Lake Plan, also looking more towards sustainability and nature-based solutions as being defined here. So those are the good things, Joy. Thank you so much. We are going to have Q&A, but because we have a really tight and packed agenda, I'm going to ask if it would be okay with everyone if we hold if you take good notes and then hold the questions and first one thing and the other in that final hour where we'll be really coming together and debriefing and digesting the work that we have done. Joy, thank you so much. Please give my love to everyone, and we will be back. And if you could join us around the 1 o'clock area, 1:15 area, to answer any questions, that would be just so appreciated.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So we're going to move on and move into, Joy, please stay with us, Joy. We're going to move on to our keynote speaker, a gentleman who I have known for many, many years. We were trying to even count back the years, but I do know it was before he got married, before they had their daughter, and now your daughter is how old, Josh?
26.
So I know it's been 26 years that we have been working in this world called the Community and Economic Development. That's from the groundwork. I come from the old school. I'm an OG. I come from the old Community and Economic Development world when we had CDCs and the National Association, and that work is very near and dear to my heart, and I am a strong advocate for the reinstitution of community development corporations, where community change is done at the community level by the people who live there and are impacted. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to our keynote speaker, Josh Silver. He did send his bio. His bio is on the QR code so everybody can read it. So Josh, come on up. And he's going to talk about a case study that we've done on two of the financial institutions.
Josh, which one is yours?
It says redlining. It has first.
Okay, I see
The book
Josh.
cover?
This
Yes.
one? Okay.
Yep. While we're getting that queued up, I am going to say my thank yous. And first of all, it is an honor and a privilege to be here today. Ramona is correct. I think we first hooked up around 1996, 1997. She was working in West Virginia at that time, and she called me up and said, there's a bank I don't think is doing a very good job. Could you run some numbers on them? And the bank was West Banco, and I ran the numbers, and we commented on their CRA exam and the merger application. As I'll explain in a second, long story short, after that experience, the bank increased their lending investments and services in low and moderate income communities. with productive partnerships with community organizations. That's what this is all about. And I am so thankful to be here with all the wonderful people in this room because you are dedicated to community revitalization and helping people help themselves. It is an honor to be with you today. And I almost didn't make it. I had two travel angels who helped me yesterday. Actually, 3 travel angels. I was coming from Baltimore. You have to connect through Atlanta to get to here. And the flight out of Baltimore is 2 hours late. And I missed my connecting flight. And the day before there were storms and think that messes up airlines. And I called Ramona and said, I may have been doing a virtual presentation. And Ramona was thinking very quick on her feet. And she said, I have a good friend, Tasha, and her cousin who are traveling through Atlanta. And not only did Tasha and Audrey pick me up, but they were 2 hours out of Atlanta and they came back. So that is service. And a hand for Tasha and Audrey, absolutely. And it was actually better than getting the connecting flight because I spent 6 blessed hours with them. And Tasha is quite a community banker. She told me, if you want to know how to make a branch work in a low and moderate income community, talk to Tasha. And also talk to Tasha about how you design a lending program. It was a great afternoon, and I got to have dinner with them and my good friend Charles Harris, who's been on our MCRC board for almost 22 years. Charles, right there, one of the nicest human beings you'll ever meet. Housing, education, and economic development here in Jackson. We're going to partner with Ramona. Okay, so I wrote a little book after almost 30 years at NCRC. When I was walking out the door, someone said, why don't you put this down in writing? And I said, that's a good idea, because when I came to NCRC in 1995, no one gave me a book. I had to learn it on my own. So I want to make things easier for the next generation. They can pick up this book, and they can figure out what my generation did wrong, what my generation did right, and how to make it better. And, I was so pleased to hear the presentation before mine. Rebuild is doing great things in New York, and it's community-centered. And that's my thesis. Ending redlining through a community-centered reform of the Community Reinvestment Act. And I'll talk more about what that means. And I think we have 25 books, which we're going to raffle off in lunch, and I think there's 25 people in the room. If there's not enough books, I encourage some of you to go buy them. I get like $2 per book, so help me make me rich. And the QR code has more information about book. Next slide. Do I do that, or you do that? Okay. So I think Rebuild, the presenter Joy did a good job describing what CRA is. It is a law that requires banks to serve all communities, including and especially low and moderate income communities. And it was passed in 1977 to combat redlining, or the systematic refusal to make loans in low and moderate income neighborhoods and communities of color. And how is CRA implemented, as Joy was talking about, is implemented by an exam. And there are 3 federal agencies that conduct CRA exams, and they literally grade banks. I'll talk about the exam components, about the lending, investment, and services. And you can go to the internet and find the report card for a bank. And not only that, community organizations can influence the grade in their community. Joy was talking about community comments. And that's one way communities participating in the process to help make communities a little more the center of CRA. And also when banks are merging, when they want to acquire another bank. That's also another key opportunity for community organizations to comment. Next slide. Okay, so what is redlining? Redlining, as I said, is a systematic refusal to make loans in neighborhoods. You'll actually see in a second how they color-coded these neighborhoods. Even where they had branches banks would refuse to make loans. Now there's a digital version. You can figure out with all the data and the AI that we have now, the demographic composition of a neighborhood. And I would venture to say that many banks do not discriminate, but some still do, and some use the digital version of redlining. I'm going to tell you about how redlining actually was facilitated by the public sector in a second. What's the impact of decades of redlining, and then you remember the subprime lending around, in the first decade of the 20th century, of the 21st century. What's the impact of all of this? Less wealth building in communities of color. And I'll give you one statistic. From 1930 to 1960, African Americans, they got 1% of the federally backed loans. These are federally backed loans, so if the loan goes bad, the federal government bails out the lender. But only 1% of these loans went to African Americans. Can you guess in those decades about what percentage of population were African Americans? Anybody take a guess?
13%.
Very close. 12, 13%. Getting 1% of the FHA loans. That's going to, I think systematically, African Americans were locked out of the American dream of home ownership in these decades. And for most middle income people, guess what? That's the way you acquire wealth and provide for your family, fund education, fund small business development. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about the story of Freddie Gray. Here's a mural of Freddie Gray. He was a young man in Baltimore. Sadly, he's no longer with us. And I'm going to tell you briefly how redlining contributed to the fate. And that's a mural of Freddie Gray in his neighborhood. This was before George Floyd. This was 2015. Next slide. So this is a redlining map in Baltimore. And you notice in the center of the city, they talk about the butterfly. There's two neighborhoods that sort of form the wings of the butterfly in the center of the city. And you notice that they are color-coded in red. These were maps commissioned by the Roosevelt administration, of all of the administrations. And they enlisted private sector experts, quote unquote, realtors, bankers, that went around, surveyed neighborhoods, and color-coded them. And when they color-coded them red, it was a homeowners loan corporation. So you hear sometimes Hulk maps. Not the Hulk, not the green guy, but these maps. The red-coded neighborhoods were the neighborhoods classified as the highest risk. Don't make loans in these neighborhoods. Sometimes, the risk was based on objective criteria like the condition of the housing stock, but many, many times it was the demographics of the neighborhood. A high percentage of African Americans, a high percentage of my people, Jews, and also Eastern European immigrants during those decades. Decades later, these neighborhoods still suffer from incredible disadvantage. And you can see my colleagues at NCRC did this research. In Freddie Gray's neighborhood in Sandtown, Winchester, dilapidated housing, poverty rate of 40%, life expectancy 69 years. Whereas in the neighborhood that got the green neighborhoods that get the most loans, 86 years on average. Literally cuts out, redlining and other forms of discrimination can cut out more than a decade of someone's life. Because you just have so many disadvantages. Unhealthy housing. Freddie Gray had lead paint poisoning because his housing was not maintained. And then he had incredible cognitive challenges. And in 2025, in the spring day, he's hanging out in the corner. The cops saw him, and you can guess what happened. Next slide. So the reverse of redlining is community reinvestment. And the Community Reinvestment Act encourages banks to make loans in neighborhoods that were formerly redlined. This is a map of Washington, D.C. This is actually an FHA map that's very similar to the Hulk map that I just showed in Baltimore. And you can see, again, the same colors, same color scheme, red, classified high risk for lending, green, go make as many loans as you want. The red is in the eastern part of the city, a neighborhood called Anacostia, predominantly African American and lower income. but CRA has encouraged banks to partner with community-based organizations. On the left is a picture of Sabrina Walls. She's a first-time homeowner. She's an African-American single parent, and a nonprofit organization was financed by a bank to build those condominium complexes. And not only is she a happy homeowner, providing a stable environment for her teenage son, but I did some research for the nonprofit organization a few years ago. On average, somebody like Sabrina, who had no wealth, on average now has $200,000 of wealth. So this is wealth building,
Yeah.
whereas reinvestment is wealth extraction and wealth deprivation. And this is the flip side of disinvestment. This is the American dream, and it should be available for everybody. Next slide. And I'm pleased, I took that picture of Sabrina and hung out with her. And she gave me permission to put her in my book. So MANA is the housing nonprofit. I told you about $200,000 on average in home building, in home equity. If you stay in your house a long time, you've acquired more than $500,000 of equity. And several of the neighborhoods that were formerly redlined in Washington, D.C. are now experiencing revitalization because of CRA, and there is gentrification. That's another set of challenges. Next slide. So this is Jackson, and you guys know the area better than I am, so I will not hazard to name the neighborhoods. But you see the same color scheme. This is a redlining map from the 1930s, and you can actually go to the University of Richmond website, type in University of Richmond redlining, and you can find these maps. There's like 200 maps. Again, same idea, redline neighborhoods, highest risk of lending. And you notice, so the people in this room, to me, represent a resilient community that's trying to revitalize their communities, that are building wealth in their communities, and are caring for the community residents and helping them help themselves. This is the success story in this room. This map really covers two of the original sins of American history that prevented wealth building. The first sin, I didn't know this, Jackson was named after Andrew Jackson, a president. And you know what Andrew Jackson did to Native Americans? The Trail of Tears. You had to march west to Oklahoma and to other western states. And a lot of Native Americans perished on that march. And then this redlining map is the second of the original sins, slavery and then Jim Crow. And I'm so glad that you talked about flooding, because there's also, I don't know the history as well as you all know in this room, but a history of inequitable water infrastructure in Jackson. I remember Charles telling me about that as well. And one of the redlined neighborhoods is, they classify these neighborhoods by numbers, D6. And it was a neighborhood just, I think, close to Medgar Evers' house, the great civil rights leader who was assassinated. And Charles took me to that house. And so these stats again, 99% people cover in D6. I think it's around here. And the life expectancy, 71 years in the neighborhoods least risky deemed for lending in the 1930s.
Josh.
80, yeah, I know, I'm coming back.
No, come here.
80 years, 69 versus 80 years. I'll be back there. Diabetes, 24% in D6, 6% in the non-redline neighborhoods. In Jackson overall, there's about 13 loans for every 1,000 housing units. In D6, less than one loan for every 1,000 housing units. So still today, it's not any redlining. It was, again, subprime lending and abusive lending in the 2000s. And it was restrictive covenants. I think.
I say I'm recording, so if you step back there, I can hear you on the recording.
Yeah, no, I understand that. That's the only time, I just wanted to remember my statistic. So that is Jackson. And next slide. But I'm going to tell you, can I take a question? Or?
Of course.
Okay.
So the spectrum is red is the worst red line, then yellow, then blue, then purple?
It was red, and then yellow, and then green. You'll see it in the book. And then, so this, I think actually I might try to do this. Yes. Okay, this is better. So sorry, I cut out here. So this, Ramona told me to look at two lenders in Jackson, and they're both pretty large lenders, Regions and Trustmark. And we're not doing this to pick on anyone. We're doing this actually to promote bank-community partnerships. And I just want to show you what the data says. This is a Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data. This is publicly available data. In the city of Jackson, African Americans are approximately 47% of the population. And all lenders in the city made 34% of their loans to African Americans. So there's about a 13 percentage point gap. So we should take steps to close that gap. And if you close that gap, guess what? That means more profitable lending opportunities for banks and more wealth building opportunities for African Americans. Where are Regions and Trustmark? They are actually better than their peers. Trustmark is at 37% versus 34%. Regions is at 42% versus 34%. But I'm going to tell you in a second why that doesn't necessarily make Regions better. I'll tell you in a second. Hold tight. This is low and moderate income. All lenders, 30% of their loans to low and moderate income people. I think, I remember it was around $60,000. It was 80% of area median income. You can look, again, it's in the publicly available data. Regions at 37% of their loans to low and moderate income people, again, higher than their peers. And that's good. And Trustmark, Trustmark is at 35%. Trustmark is, trails Regions a little bit. However, next slide, young man. I know I'm driving you crazy. Okay. Trustmark has 800 loans, home purchase loans in Jackson, Mississippi in 2024. Regions had 89. So Trustmark had about 10 times the number of loans as Regions. So even though Regions was offering a higher percentage to underserved populations, we want to see if we can increase Regions' loan volume. And why is this going on? Part of it is just where their geographic footprint of these banks. Mississippi is a more important area. Well, it's not more important. All areas are important. But on the CRA exam for Trustmark, Mississippi counts more than on Regions CRA exam. Trustmark, Regions is a lot bigger than Trustmark. $153 billion as of the last CRA exam. It's probably gone up a little bit. Trustmark at about $19 billion in assets. So you get a sense, and Regions is in other states as well. When a bank is really large, it does not necessarily mean that's going to be better for your community.
Right.
Because it's where the bank focuses its effort, and CRA exams tend to give more weight where there is a higher percentage of the bank's lending activity. However, if the community speaks up and engages in Regions and partnerships with Regions, says there are missed opportunities, I bet you we can get Regions hopefully above 89 loans. Both banks have affordable home mortgage products. Maybe Trustmark uses them more. I don't know, but this is when you have conversations with banks, you can kind of get some of these insights. And maybe this has something to do with branching patterns. Maybe Trustmark has branches that are more accessible to underserved communities. And you get, on the CRA exam, you can get a lot of good statistics. Retail market share of Regions was 1%. They were 1% of the home loan market in Jackson, but the share of their deposits, there were 19% of the deposits in Jackson.
Okay.
So their lending share is a lot lower than their deposit share. So I think there's an opportunity to get them to do a little bit more. But also, don't rest easy on Trustmark. See if you can work on Trustmark to improve their lending as well. Opportunity. Wherever there's a gap, a credit gap, there's an opportunity for both profitable lending and wealth building for communities. A win-win. Next slide. This is community development financing, and Joy did a great job describing the difference between like making an individual home loan and this community development financing is a larger scale project that benefits like an entire neighborhood or several neighborhoods. So I think that this slide, even though it shows differences in the performance of the banks, it shows that CRA has done a lot, even though we need to focus CRA more on underserved communities. Trustmark has 339 investments recorded on its last CRA exam. Can you imagine that happening before CRA? 339 investments that benefited low and moderate income communities over like a 2-year time period. I would venture to say before CRA that would not have happened. Even though there could have been the most well-intentioned human beings working at that bank. It just CRA gives you a little more of a push, and actually makes all people in the bank row in the same direction, hopefully. Trustmark had 109 million of community development loans, like a construction loan for like affordable housing in Jackson. And you notice that Regions is a lot bigger, but it has 77 million in community development loans on its CRA exam. So Trustmark 108, Regions 77. Maybe we can get Regions a little higher. And investments, Trustmark 44 million in Jackson and Regions 23 million in Jackson. And let's see, I'm sorry, that's 23 million in community development loans versus 44 million for Trustmark in Jackson. The first figure was for the entire state. So Trustmark again, 44 versus 23 million in community development loans. Community development investments is a little different. It's like an equity investment. Some of you are familiar with low-income housing tax credits, equity investments in affordable housing. For example, Regions is 62 million, and Trustmark is 44 million. So on that metric in CD investments, Regions is ahead of Jackson. So there's some inconsistency. So we're trying to use CRA to make the bank more consistent in its community development performance. And here are some interesting investments. 3.5 million new market tax credit for rehab of medical clinic for Trustmark, and low-income housing tax credits, $54 million for Regions. These are very commendable activities. However, I was talking to Charles and his friends before the presentation that we have data on a metropolitan level, but the metropolitan level of Jackson has 4 counties, and the city is in Hines. And we do not have data on the CRA exam that goes down to a county level. So we don't know how much of this is actually benefiting the city. Right. And during the Biden administration, there was CRA reform that would have gotten us this data. Guess what happened during this administration? They are repealing that requirement. So that's why this stuff is really important, and that's why no matter which administration is in the White House, what I would like to see one day is a community organizations and banks says, this stuff is important. And we need strong CRA exams and we need robust data. If in 10 years, I have 100 banks and 100 community organizations holding hands and going to Capitol Hill and saying that, then I've succeeded.
Is Hines County only?
No, this is a whole metro area. The whole metro area.
That's the MSA, the Metropolitan Statistical Area.
Yeah.
So the next slide. So I'm going to go a little more about the history of CRA now for the next few slides and what my recommendations are. I'm going to try to hit the accelerator a little bit, so I won't be talking about every single bullet point and every single slide. CRA by the way, the mother of CRA is a woman named Gail Sincata. She was a community advocate in Chicago. Amazing story. I encourage you to learn more about Gail Sincata. There's a couple of books. So the community organizations partnered with a forward-thinking senator, Senator William Proxmire of Wisconsin, and he has his definition of redlining, which is very similar to what I talked about earlier. And I talk about how CRA got through Congress. Proxmire was a legislative genius, and the community organizations were also pushing. 1977, I was 13 and got my bar mitzvah in 1977. Didn't quite know what CRA, bar mitzvah is when a ceremony when a Jewish boy or Jewish girl, quote unquote, becomes an adult and talks about the Bible and says Hebrew. So anyway, I did not know what CRA was, but it's maybe symbolic that it was passed the year that I had my bar mitzvah. Maybe I was destined to do this work. So next slide. I won't go through this slide in much detail because we talked about this. This is what the law says, and there's more of a description in the book. And you'll get a sense, a couple of slides about what is on the CRA exam. So next slide. So for different banks, there are different types of CRA exams. For large banks, those with approximately $1.6 billion in assets and larger, and it's in the book, you don't have to take copious notes, but you can if you want. There are 3 parts to the large bank exam. A lending test that looks at retail lending in low and moderate income neighborhoods and low and moderate income communities. An investment test, like how many low-income housing tax credit investments. How many investments in small business investment corporations, for example. How responsive are they to needs? Sometimes the smaller community development activity is actually more responsive than the larger ones. Sometimes it's the reverse. So there's also a qualitative part to the exam. Services, bank branches, and deposit accounts and other types of services. Now there's another category of banks, not quite small, not quite large, called intermediate banks. There's a retail lending test and a community development test, which combines aspects of the investment and services test, but it's a little, in the vernacular, it's a little easier. Because the idea is, while they have fewer assets, so we're going to give them more of a streamlined exam. There's a robust debate and discussion about how easy or how hard the exam should be for different categories of banks. Small banks, was about $400 million in assets and lower, just a retail lending test. And to give you a sense of why it matters, whether we participate or not and how we vote, I'm not going to make any other partisan comment, but the FDIC just said that small banks are going to be examined once every 5 or 6 years. Yeah. And it used to be more frequent, once every 2 to 4 years. And if they're examined less frequently, guess what? Less accountability. Right. And CRA says there's a continuing and affirmative obligation. So is that exam schedule consistent with the statutory requirement? There wasn't even a public comment period when the FDIC made that change. A very important issue. Next slide. So this is a history of CRA ratings. What I'm about to say is going to surprise you, maybe not surprise you. Most banks pass. 98% of banks pass. They're outstanding or at least satisfactory. And the highest grade is outstanding in the blue. You notice that the great majority of the ratings are satisfactory. It's like 90%. Does it make sense that 90% of banks or students in a class get the same exact grade? No, intuitively not. And I make a case in the book that no, they should not. There should be at least one more rating. There should be 5 ratings as opposed to 4. And kind of on like the lending test and the investment test and service test, there is kind of 5 ratings. And the failed ratings are gray. You see very few failed ratings, gray and yellow. You notice in the beginning years when the ratings first became public in 1990, about 10% of the banks failed. Before 1990, between 1977 and 1990, the ratings were secret. So guess what? When they became public, some banks that weren't doing the work were kind of exposed. But then I think they did work harder and they improved. But some of this is also probably CRA grade inflation. But nevertheless, even though I think the ratings, and these are ratings for different categories of banks, I won't go through that. I discuss that in detail in the book. So even though there's ratings inflation, the fact that there's public accountability and there's opportunities for community to participate has made a profound difference. And just CRA exams themselves, again, think like more than 300 investments over a 2-year time period for a bank? That would not have happened if there was no CRA. So this is, it has had progress, but we need more progress. So let's, work it harder. Next slide. So here's a slide about merger applications. When banks merge, they want to merge and get bigger and get more profitable. But often, sometimes, you know what happens sometimes when companies merge and they get too big and they get complacent? They become monopolistic and they don't serve the customer that well. You can kind of get a little lazy. Banks have been known to close branches. So there is a legal requirement in banking law that mergers are also required to benefit the community, specifically the convenience and needs. That's a legal requirement. So federal agencies can approve mergers, can deny mergers, perhaps because the banks are not safe and sound or they're not meeting convenience and needs, or they can make an approval with conditions. Your merger is approved, but you have to make improvements in fair lending or CRA. You notice, and this is just one of the federal agencies, there's 3, the Federal Reserve Board, the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, the FDIC, and they regulate banks with different types of charters, and more detail in the book. But you notice that there were 494 applications, only 1 denial. They say, oh, what's the teeth in the law if there's only 1 denial? Nearly 500 applications. Again, in some very important cases, it's about public accountability. And when you have, even though it doesn't happen too often, it happens like once every 3 years, say in Mississippi and Alabama, in the Deep South. If something like this happens once every 3 years where a merger is approved but with conditions, it sends a signal throughout the whole market. And indeed, I think Ramona was talking about Renaissance Bank. In Mississippi, they wanted to acquire Merchants and Farmers Bank, and we looked at the data, and they were not doing good in lending to underserved communities. The FDIC and NCRC commented, a lot of our members commented, and the FDIC said, your merger is approved, but you have to have an improvement plan. And I remember actually looking at Renaissance data a few years later, their numbers went up. A win-win. So next slide. So even though you have CRA inflation and most mergers are approved, there are important events that it's kind of an accountability shock. But even aside from that, this the day-to-day work that you all do in this room when you have partnerships with banks makes a big difference. So keep at it. And then these economists have with their fancy statistical equations, that when a census tract loses CRA eligibility, perhaps it's a happy story. It goes from low to moderate income to middle income. Actually, lending decreases because there's a little bit less pressure on the banks. So that's kind of a CRA effect. And like small business lending, there's a similar impact of CRA. CRA gives you a little bump. And when you remove the motivation of CRA, actually lending can decline. But eligibility of census tracts is calculated periodically, and if the tract that lost CRA eligibility got into trouble and then the income started declining, going to become CRA eligible again and hopefully get a bump again. And again, the public accountability. Next slide. Community benefits agreements. So this is not required by the CRA regulation or law, But when banks are merging and they want to describe a public benefit, which is required, some banks will actually negotiate community benefits agreements with community organizations, and NCRC will convene oftentimes a lot of community organizations, say in Mississippi and Alabama, so stay tuned through Ramona for opportunities. If you're doing housing counseling or small business technical assistance. And the CRA agreements actually are documents that commit banks to more lending and investing after the merger than before. 1 + 1 should at least equal 2, hopefully 3. 1 + 1 should not equal 1/2, right? And sometimes after the merger, you have bad math. It equals 1/2 if you're not watching them. So since 2016, NCRC and our member organizations have negotiated CBAs with 22 banks, combined $603 billion in retail lending and community development finance. And these two economists down here on the last bullet point found that the community benefits agreements have a major increase in loans, but it's time limited. When the CBAs, they're usually 3 to 4 years. When they lapse, when the time period's up, the lending can go down again. So one thing is you got to keep watching. You figure out the banks you want a partnership in your community, and you keep watching them. 'Cause it's human nature. Even though the banks have a lot of good people in them, I was talking for 6 hours with one of them yesterday, Tasha. Staff change. The leadership changes. So when that happens, you got to watch them. And you say, the previous guy or gal did a great job. We want you to do a great job and benefit as well as we benefit. Next slide. I talk more about this in the book. The only way the world goes around is there is a debate and discussion. And that's actually healthy, to have debate, discussion, disagreement, because you're trying to make yourself better. But some of the critics have said CRA is a shakedown. The community groups call banks bad names, and they do all these community benefits agreements that actually result in loans that go into default and foreclosure. Couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth. In fact, there's been a lot of research that says that CRA-covered banks make safer and sounder loans than who were making the bad loans in the subprime lending crisis? It was the independent mortgage companies not covered by CRA. And to make the story even a little more confusing and complex, some of the largest banks have investment banks, and they were buying up the loans from the independent mortgage companies. And guess what? The investment banks of these bank holding companies are not covered by CRA. It's really the retail part of the bank. So you gotta really, I make a case in the book, you gotta expand CRA broadly throughout the financial industry. So next slide. And there's a lot of other stuff. CRA causes gentrification, that's one of the criticisms. Actually, I don't think so, but you do need to be careful, and you do need to preserve affordable housing in neighborhoods that are, gentrifying, and CRA can help you do that. And so I talk in the book about ways to make the public participation process easier. It's actually not easy to comment on a CRA exam, especially for a big bank, because a big bank can have 30, operating in 20 states. You're not a CRA exam. I couldn't do that. I couldn't comment on 20 states, but I could comment on Jackson, right? And Jackson should count more, especially if things aren't going well in Jackson. Banks, if they get like a C or low satisfactory in Jackson, they ought to be required to submit a public improvement plan, for example. How are we going to get at least a satisfactory, if not an outstanding grade in Jackson the next time? Some of the largest banks in the country, maybe say the 50 largest banks, maybe there ought to be public hearings in conjunction with the CRA exams to really get input about what community needs are across a lot of different types of communities. And keep building partnerships. So these are my thoughts about how to improve public participation in CRA exams and make it more community-centered. Next slide. And these are some of the CRA heroes. On the right, there's a first-time homeowner, I believe it was Houston. And on the left, I interviewed this fellow who helps small businesses, Asai Lee and refugee small businesses in California. Namush Sokam is Cambodian, and he wants a CRA. He basically wants a CBA, one of the merger applications. Next slide. Finding out how to again, how to improve public participation. Finding out how to comment on CRA exams and merger applications is not easy. I have suggestions about how the federal agencies can make it easier, make it more prominent on the on their websites. The agency's seriousness of how they consider comments. Actually, the Federal Reserve Board on merger applications tends to do the best job, even though they could do better. But on CRA exams, you rarely, almost never, this community group was concerned about lending in low and moderate income communities in Jackson. You won't see that on a CRA exam. You should, because community organizations are more likely to keep commenting if there's an indication the agencies care, right? Agencies should create more opportunities for bank community dialogue at agency-sponsored conferences. I talk about that in the book. See stuff like this, what we're going to do. More and better data from agency websites. I talked about that earlier. The next slide. Again, I talked about improvement plans, public hearings for the largest banks on CRA exams. And we just don't want to open up a CRA exam, 500 pages, and on the top you see pass. You want more nuance. Which areas did they do good in? Which areas need improvement? And the nuance gives you more, because it's never the case that the bank's going to be great at everything. There's going to be gaps. But also you want to keep them great at the things they're great at, and then improving on the gaps. So more nuance, and hopefully the nuance leaps out a little more. It should be in the first 5 pages, not on page 500. I mean, CRA exams are complicated for the largest banks, but there's a way to make summaries at the beginning that make it more community friendly. And I talk about that in the book. Next slide. I talked about 5 ratings before, and during Trump 1, there was a regulator named Joseph Otting who was head of one of the agencies. He wanted to reduce CRA to 1 rating. One performance measure, not 1 rating. The dollar amount of CRA activities divided by the assets of the bank. You can't reduce CRA to, because there's different needs, right? You can't reduce it to 1 measure. Even the banks didn't like that. So it's just one example of, my book is about what you should avoid. And that's one thing you should avoid. Next slide. CRA and race. I talk about this in more detail in the book. I won't have time to talk about all of this. But you notice that CRA in 1977 was an income-based law, low and moderate income borrowers, low and moderate income neighborhoods. They avoided race because race was the 3rd rail in politics in 1977 as it is today. It should not be, but it is. And Senator Proxmire thought he couldn't get it passed if CRA explicitly said look at communities of color, even though those redlining maps, it was predominantly African American neighborhoods. And in 2023, there was a big CRA rulemaking that would have made CRA a lot of, not all of my recommendations, but a good number of them were in the CRA regulatory 2023 reform. And that sounds kind of regulatory reform. What does that mean? It's what the exam looks like and what the exam measures. So a lot of the stuff I was just talking about. And one thing that we tried to say in 2023 is, okay, well, you probably know that you're not going to look explicitly at African Americans, but could you at least look at census tracts? Remember when I said Jackson, less than 1 loan for every 1,000 housing units in that neighborhood D6? That's an underserved census tract, and it's predominantly communities of color. And CRA is always intended to address underserved neighborhoods. So if you have a category in CRA exams, underserved census tracts, it would help at least address wealth gaps in communities of color. The agencies did not go for that.
I have to raise this about those census tracts that you're talking about.
Yep.
We are sitting in that census tract, and we have 2 major financial institutions right in this triangle, and that's why we strategically chose the Medical Mall as our venue. because we have Regions across the street, we have Trustmark right here on the corner, and we have Liberty Bank.
Yep.
And
show me the data.
show me the data.
So, you know, it goes back to that discussion. It's not, you know, community development financing, for example, is not required to be on county level on CRA exams, but maybe you can ask, you know, Regions and Trustmark and Liberty, can you at least give us the data by county? Can you give us some examples of community development finance projects that you're doing in the city? And if they don't come back with anything, then you go back to them with some proposals for Hinds County. So next slide. Assess geographical areas in CRA exams. CRA was passed in 1997. There was no internet. Lending was done through branches. Now there's internet and there's other ways you can make loans beyond branches. In 2023, they addressed, you know, it was kind of a simple concept. Wherever there's a lot of lending, even if there's no branches, we are going to examine you. But guess what? That's going to go away soon. And the bank industry actually filed a lawsuit against that. And I'm kind of like, when I talk to audiences with banks and community organizations now, it's like, we got to agree on this stuff, or at least come to more agreement. Maybe not specifically how geographical areas beyond branches are going to be examined, but at least agree that this is important, because you can't have the yo-yo where, okay, you have this really good 2023 reform that community organizations liked, but now the Trump administration is going to bring it back to 1995. Is that good for banks? Banks need to plan. It's not good for business planning. We cannot have this yo-yo. We have to talk and have dialogue and figure out at least some things that we agree upon, or at least narrow the differences. And then we go to the politicians and say, stop the yo-yo. Next slide. Oh yeah, applying CRA to non-banks. There are some state CRA laws in Illinois, New York, and other places. There's an effort in New Jersey. Apply CRA to large credit unions that don't have, you'll be surprised if you look at the numbers. Independent mortgage companies, the insurance industry, and I even talk about thinking about CRA beyond the financial industry. So, you know, there's a sad note on this slide that I was hoping to end my career, or, you know, start the sunset part of my career. We did this great reform in 2023, and I'm writing it, I'm memorializing it in the book. But then, the book was published in April of 2025, and shortly thereafter, the Trump administration said, "Oh, we're going back to 1995." So I just could have, you know, started drinking, you know, doing self-destructive things, but that's not my nature. My nature is, this is a history of CRA in this book. I know you're going back to 1995, but gosh darn it, we want you in future years, when there's an opportunity, when there's calmer heads, when we can talk to each other in a more civil manner, let's get back to at least some of the things in 2023, because this stuff is vitally important, and this stuff is about wealth building and making everybody in this country comfortable and able to raise a family. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much.
I don't even know how to follow that. Well, as you can see, it is very difficult to take years of experience and years of work and condense it down into 45 minutes. But
I did not. I violated that.
but Josh did an amazing job, and this is going to give us an opportunity to continue more, to build on, to learn more, learn together, and move a progressive and an innovative agenda forward in the city of Jackson. And also, CRA doesn't only, banks, the regulators don't only look at banks' CRA performance in urban areas, but also in rural communities. And because MCUP got started up in the rural areas, we do a lot of work in concentration, concentration on that around community development. So at this point, maybe we can take maybe just a quick minute stretch and everything like that, and then we're going to move. We are off schedule, everybody. So, but I hope it's worth it. And then I'm gonna turn it over to Asia, and we're gonna put the working groups together. Oh, how many bankers do we have in the space? 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. So the idea is to partner financial institutions and community groups together in a round table to talk about and learn what the banks are doing in their CRA activities, and then also community groups can talk about what their projects are and what they're doing as organizations and work in the community. So we want to take just a 3-minute stretch, and then I'm going to turn it over to Asia, and she's going to break us out.
And I just want to reassure everybody, we are going to share all the info with you today. So you don't have to worry about taking pictures and all that. We're going to make sure you get everything you need. So just enjoy, take notes as you need. We're going to get you everything you need, okay? Also, there's still refreshments in the back. Please get them. right, if you can hear my voice, clap one time. If you hear my voice, clap 2 times. All right. Okay, so my brother Adam, he is getting everybody together. We're about to get into the breakout sessions. So if you can, we're gonna try to have 4 groups. Okay, so we got these 2 tables on this side pushed together, will be group 1. And we're gonna push these tables together for these 3 rows to make 3 breakout groups. Okay, so y'all just fill up these 2 tables. Go ahead and get close. We're gonna get some help to push them together. And we want 1 financial institution person at each breakout. I think we identified 4 people, correct?
All I see is permanent markers. I don't see no color. It was kids. I'm talking about for the man.
We're gonna have 1 major breakout question that everybody's gonna answer, okay? So the question is, what would it take structurally, relationally, and financially for resources to flow at the scale our communities actually need? What would it take for resources to flow at the scale our communities actually need? That's structurally, relationally, and financially. Okay, so at each table, we will have a facilitator. Who are the facilitators? Raise your hand. We got Savannah. I'm gonna be at one. We got Ms. Lee. Who else? Who's the facilitator at your table? Mercy. Dr. Hilliard. Okay. All right. So facilitator, y'all responsibility is to make sure your breakout session flow. Okay, make sure everybody speak. Okay. Make sure people taking notes. Okay, we also need a note taker. Who the note taker at the table? Who the note taker? Note taker gonna be at the sticky paper, writing everything down on the sticky paper on the wall. Who the note takers? Yes. We got our note takers. Miss Chandra, you a note taker? What about over here, group 1 over here? Who taking group? Who taking the notes over here? Who's the note taker? Okay. All right. And we need a timekeeper. Who gonna keep time at the table? You can't do both, Mercy. You gotta pick one.
Well, Gen Z,
Who who gonna take time at your group? Heather. Okay. Who else? I don't hear y'all. We need a timekeeper. Who is a timekeeper at your table? Takia? Okay, I see you. Okay, all right, so facilitator. Each person has 3 minutes to talk. In those 3 minutes, you need to introduce yourself, your name, your organization, the role you play, and where you work. You got 1 minute to do that part. Then you do your own individual response to the question. Okay? You got 3 minutes each. So the question is, what would it take structurally, relationally, and financially for resources to flow at the scale our community needs? I'm gonna give y'all an example. I'm gonna answer myself. So I'm Ava Simone. I'm the owner of Brainchild Media, where I focus on aligning strategy, organizing storytellers to build community power. And I work in Jackson. And to answer the question, it would take a lot more of this. It needs to be, what I do for Brainchild Media gives me room to build a collective called Jackson Forward Collective. Raise your hand, my Jackson Forward folks is in the room. We're building a new nonprofit where we focus on anti-racist community development and also real cross-sector collaboration. So I feel like relationally, it's gonna take more cross-sector relationships and collaboration. And that means we gotta build relationship. We gotta build trust. We gotta collaborate and show up for each other. Financially, we need our banks to get on board with us. We need big philanthropy to get on board with us. And I think financially and structurally, that's the really community development and economics come together. You can't have one without the other. So that's my answer. Now, I did that. Was that under 3 minutes? Real quick. Because the goal is, so once everybody gets to talk, there will be time for y'all to come together to do the things we all need to do. So after everybody talks, you're going to identify 2 to 3 key barriers, 2 to 3 actionable solutions, and 1 opportunity for cross-sector collaboration. Okay? Example for me, 2 to 3 key barriers. I name silos. I name we don't have the right investment from our philanthropy and our banking institutions. Actionable solution, more meetings like this, where we're not just organizing in our own sector, but you have residents at the table, you got business owners at the table, you have financial institutions at the table. Like, we're actually meeting together to share expertise and knowledge. We need more of that intentionally in different pockets across the state, across the city. Okay, and 1 opportunity for cross-sector collaboration. The spirit of Jackson Forward Collective is just that. We have built a relationship with each other. There's a lot of heavy hitters in our group, and they already got practices going on. So they just need a little bit more support. They need support, some of them need financing, some of them need actual people to help them push their things over the finish line. So we don't have to start from scratch. If we can support each other, get that big project done, that's a win for the community. So that's an actual real example. My brother, Roger Red, has the hangar. He already got his plans made up, he already got support, he got the building, got the space, he need financing. Lorena Steiner from Yahoo does a lot of work. They already have projects that are already ready, we just need the support. So feel free in your answers, talk about what you got going on. What do you need? What project are you working on? Because there may be somebody sitting next to you that can help you get that across the finish line. Okay? Does that make sense? Did I give good examples? All right. All right, so I'm gonna let y'all go. We're gonna have 30 minutes to do this. So 3 minutes each, then y'all have 7 minutes to kind of talk to each other. I'm gonna keep y'all abreast of how the time is. Get your time together. All right. 1, 2, 3, go.
Training for, so the 4 areas that we're working in, building capacity for leadership development, leadership development and capacity building. That's for the leaders and the organization. We're doing work around funding and mobilization, because there's not a lot of organizations don't know how to get money, but then also how do you manage that money that you get. And then we are doing another piece of policy and advocacy. How do we train organizations on how to advocate for themselves when it comes to this work? Because a lot of nonprofits, I say, but I can't lie, we know you can't, right? But it's certain things that you have to do, right? And the last one is collaboration. We're strategically working with organizations and forcing them to understand collaboration is key. We had a national funders meeting and collaboration was one of the major things that organizations. Community foundations, yeah, more resources. A lot of times it's connected to stand-up financial institutions. The CRA dollars when it comes to financial justice are very small. But what is not being done is there's 7 or 9 community foundations. So let me. I know. Yeah, that's what I'm about. But yeah. So yeah.
And keep having conversation. But your time is up. But don't worry, hopefully this won't be the first or last conversation, correct? Y'all made some relationships, met some new people that you want to keep talking to?
Yes.
Okay. So we gonna make sure for those that consent, make sure everybody get everybody's information, okay? So don't worry about it. Okay, so which group, who's gonna be my group number 1? This group, Emmanuel. I'm gonna let y'all be group 1. Who reporting now from y'all? Emmanuel. Come on. Who's gonna report out from y'all group, Emmanuel? Okay. All right, I need somebody. You got 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Give me your highlights. Give me your key barriers, actionable solutions, and one opportunity for cross-sector collaboration, and some highlights from what y'all talked about. Yes. Can y'all, everybody please respect the man. He has the mic right now.
Can the person have a microphone?
Sure. Well, this. I mean, if you want to come up here, you can. But he need to read the notes. Okay. If y'all want to come up here and use the mic, you can. Whoever your person reporting now, feel free. Because also the people on the Zoom can hear you if you come up here too.
Introduce yourself, please.
Greetings and salutations. Y'all look good up in here this afternoon. I'm Emmanuel Williams, the Executive Director of EDW Equity Corporation. We focus on helping folks understand where the opportunities are in Mississippi because, believe it or not, there's several opportunities. It's just about knowing the right language. That's come up twice today. So, key barriers. Something that keeps being said in every nonprofit room that I'm in. We work in silos. Amen. 1, we don't work together, and 2, we don't work with outside partners. I think that covers it. The second point is we have to understand where the opportunities are so we can know where to go and get them. And I would add a third thing, which is proper bookkeeping. Because if you get money, you got to spend it properly and then be able to document what you did with said money. Solutions for opportunities. I think today is the start of something like that. We can't let coming to convenings like these be the only time when we get together. There are people in here who do different things. There are people in here who do the same thing. Well, it's only a finite amount of money for the work that we do. And so if we can put narcissism and egos aside and work together, maybe we could make some more money and have a greater impact. Have I answered all the questions before I? Okay, good.
Emmanuel, your voice is so commanding. I'm gonna try to do the same. Good afternoon, morning. What time is it? Morning. Good morning, everyone. All right, my name is Takia Williams. I am co-founder of Succeed and Elevate. We are a nonprofit here in Jackson, Mississippi that helps develop better leaders so we can have stronger, more developed communities. All right, so in my group, some of the key barriers that we recognized was one, access and capital, which we all talk about that. It is the access to the funding, how do we get there, and then getting the funding. Another barrier was community lack of community. Same thing that you spoke about, Emmanuel. It is us working in silos. So it's how do we build communities in these industries amongst the entrepreneurs? How do we all build collectives amongst each other so we can help each other rise and help push each other forward? And then last was collaboration and lack of trust with the funding institutions. So a lot of times banks and the entrepreneurs or even funders lack the relationship. So helping entrepreneurs, leaders, and those that want to go after the funding, build the relationships. And if we don't know how to build the relationships, help develop us so that we can build the relationship. Yeah, exactly. So it's the development, it's the collaboration, and it's building the trust amongst us all. And some of the solutions that we thought of was building relationships. So of course, building relationships, building those communities. Within one thing that we heard at our table, there were different contractors and the issues that the contractors deal with when it comes to I can't say the word, but y'all, that word, you know what I mean. The racism and the things that they have to deal with in the silos working, them building organizations and collaborations to collab together so they can help each other through the struggles. Also, development with guaranteed funding. There's a lot of development out there where there's choices of funding, there's possible funding, there is if you do, then this. Well, we want to help create those solutions where there's actual development. If we're not ready for your funding, help develop us and then guarantee us funding so we can utilize that to help with our missions. We also had quicker access. So a lot of times in entrepreneurship, we need the access to the capital now. So that's one of the issues when we're having to go after the capital. There's strenuous processes. By the time we get the capital, what we were trying to do, we need more. So quicker access to that capital so that we can use that funding and actually do something with it within a timely manner.
One more thing, can you tell us, were there opportunities for cross collaboration which you identified?
In our group, yes. Within our group, we had contractors. We had development groups that actually was in need of contractors. So developing and connecting against there was in our group.
Yes, thank you.
Love it.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, and that was it. So develop us. If we need the funding and you don't think that we're ready, help develop us to be ready and give us the funding so we can do what we need to do. Because regardless, we're going to do it. So help us get there.
Thank you very much. All right, then, group 3.
Are we group 3?
Yeah, group 3, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we just kind of made it up there.
What is this by? This is by, Ava.
Good morning, I'm Kimberly, and I'm representing Group 3, which is a very wonderful and diverse team. One of the barriers that we discussed was the negative perception of many of our communities. We're representing Delhaven, West Jackson, Ferry Street, Verdon Addition, Georgetown, Mid-City, but we also said that there's a negative perception around the state and the city themselves. So that has a lot to do with the money flowing into the state as well. But we also talked about funding stopping at the state and federal level, not state, well, federal, of course, federal, state, and city level, and not actually getting to the community organizations doing the great work on the ground. And so we see that as a barrier. There's a lot of planning efforts going on right now. Somebody who's been with the city for a long time said they have seen many of these efforts start, and we always have a great start, but it fizzles out. We never get to actionable ends. For action, we were saying we were so happy about this space and place putting us together. So we need more of this. We need more relationship building, as well as networking. We need to know what we do, what each of the organizations are doing out there. How do we synergize? Where are the gaps? Where are the niches? And so how do we partner with each other? How do we recognize those gaps and bring people in to help us? We also talked about building trust and consensus building. Everybody is talking about collaboration. It's almost kind of the word of the year. But we ourselves as organizations within the city, we don't have trust among each other, so it's hard to partner. So we would love to see something about how do we get beyond our past hurts, our past failures, and build that trust and learn how to do consensus. Which, when I used the example of consensus building, I was saying that we could all be around a table and we could talk about our individual projects and we go after, let's say, something and it funds one of us. And we have to be okay with that. And how does that organization that got funded look out for the folks who have girded them up? And so we need to learn that art of consensus building. For actionable items, we want to see correct data around our communities.
Yes.
Oftentimes, when you look at the census tract, one, they're old. Jackson is one of the fastest shrinking cities in the U.S., so we don't know who lives here, where they live. I think we're losing like 3,000 folks a year. So we need to have correct data, but also to know what to do with the data. There's a lot of plans that sit on the shelf. I'm an urban planner, so I know that's one of our things that folks don't like about planners is that we plan, but we create these beautiful plans and then they just sit there.
Become dust collectors.
They become desk collectors, and so we're beyond that. Because we were saying specifically around collaboration and consensus building that because of the current funding climate that we cannot afford to continue to fight each other. We have to work together. And then we talked about really creating a strategy with the banks. Oftentimes we're going to the banks, asking them for funding, but we're not asking what are their funding priorities. What is the leadership direction for the bank? And then also one of the bankers was saying oftentimes we're asking for funding, but we don't have a relationship with the bank or the bankers. So we need to learn all of those strategies and how do we move forward. This is a great time for Jackson, and I'm very hopeful. Thank you.
Before you go, was there any solution for actual collaboration at your table that y'all talked about?
The strategy with the bank, the asset mapping with the correct data.
Thank you. All right, very good. Group 4.
All right, good morning. My name is Omar Muhammad. Glad to be here. For Group 4, our key barriers were frameworks that could be replicated, particularly around community revitalization. That includes planning, implementation, and assessment. We also talked about the lack of technical assistance to identify resources as well as accessing those resources. And specifically, there was a lot of conversation around capital access for critical home repairs. That came up often in the conversation. It also was a solution kind of built in the response that the criteria for qualifying needs to be relaxed, particularly for low wealth households that may have different barriers and challenges to accessing those capitals. And specifically, the banking infrastructures need to provide specific technical assistance around that access. For actionable solutions, this kept coming up as well as a solution, and well-researched and organized frameworks, right, that can be replicated across many different communities. Collaborations, I think everyone has used that word this morning, particularly around think tanks. Let's see, non-traditional contributors to the CBA was also mentioned, and then leveraging shared interests was another actionable solution. Cross-sector, we discussed developing a working group to continue what can be built off in these discussions, and then continuing what we are doing today, having many more of these kind of focus groups and discussions.
Okay, was there opportunity for cross-sector collaboration at your time?
That was, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you,
All right.
Brother Omar.
You're welcome.
Okay, so what, I just wanna give a few minutes for reaction since, since you got to hear what other groups were talking about. Just kind of think about if there's one thing that stuck with you or that you wanna react to. For me, of course, breaking down the silos. Also having Black contractors in the room, that's something that's very important, and being able to sit down and hear their experience. How redlining and systematic racism affects them, especially in a predominantly Black city. We should have more, right? So those are my high level reactions. Anybody else want to speak out?
Well, in terms of breaking down the silos, we had good discussion in our group about food insecurity, about the needs of the youth, and preventing a brain drain, and about housing and home care.
Dr. You want to use the mic just so people can hear you on the Zoom?
So in terms of breaking down the silos, in my group we had a good discussion about food insecurity, about youth needs and preventing a brain drain, about housing finance and critical need of home repair finance, food. Yeah. So one way to break down the silos is you create a citywide plan, whether it's done by the municipality or some other trusted advisor, and you have the communities rallying around the master plan to try to prevent the urban plan from just collecting dust. And obviously I talked a lot about CRA, but not only banks but other financial institutions and non-financial institutions, the healthcare sector, the technology sector, the manufacturing sector. Let's all put into the kitty of reinvestment, and also more revenues, more funding resources for nonprofits.
Thank you. All right, we got room for maybe one more reaction. Come on up here, Jasmine.
The two things that stuck out to me were not only asking for the funding, but making sure when people ask you where the funding went, have the bookkeeping all together, and then developing programs for entrepreneurs and nonprofits. If you say that we don't have what we need, make sure that there's a way for us to have what we need that ends in the end goal, the money.
Hold on, Ms. Marlon. Marco, I would like to hear what you think. Could you come up here because you're a contractor? I just want do you have any high level reactions to the conversation that happened? Anything you're taking with you? Just a reaction to this conversation.
Hi, I'm Marco LaFleur. I own LaFleur Construction. We build affordable homes across the country, basically. Happy to be here. So you asked me what now? What's my question? Oh, in reaction. I think that there's some very powerful people in the room, and it's sad that we don't know each other, or we do know each other, and we don't come together as often as we do, because I see some of the people I've worked with from years and years and years, and I didn't know they were going to be in the room today. But we have the talent, we have the know-how, we have everything we need to be successful, to grow our communities. I think that from my perspective, I'm a contractor, and I want to train 40 or 50 contractors. We need contractors bad. Right now, I was telling my table, we needed to put an HVAC system on top of this building. We're the only minority firm that can put that HVAC system on top of this building, or a boiler or chiller. to heat or cool a big hospital or something. And we need to train some guys, and I've been looking to train. I give it away free. I don't ask for anything because we need it through Mississippi, Alabama, all throughout the South, not just Jackson.
We have a building up in Duck Hill that we've been working on. It's a Brownfields project. It's a beautiful historic school, the Bedford High School, and we need, Chanel, we need you to come and look at it because we need a room.
So you trying to give me a job? But so in order to apply for a commercial contractor's license, you know, listen, sister. In order to apply for a commercial contractor's license, there are a lot of barriers you have to go through.
Right.
And the average person look at that application, they're going to turn away and they're not going to try to apply for that license. It's going to ask for this $50,000 here and this certified public review that cost me $25,000 before I even take my test. You know, so there's a lot of barriers to get a commercial license because these are licenses that are going to allow you to build stadiums, hospitals, you know, highway, streets, bridges. These licenses are very powerful licenses, and in order to apply to get these licenses, the barriers are just insurmountable, one would think. But someone who's been through it would say, hold on, let's look at it this way. You can get through the application process. And so, and from a residential standpoint, if I'm going to build one house in Madison, I'm going to make more money than build 10 houses in Jackson. So the average contractor don't want to build in a place they can't make money because it's very risky. So you have to create people that really, and build people that really want to build in our neighborhoods, because the average contractor, he may have a good heart, but he's gonna go build somewhere he can make money, or she's gonna build somewhere she can make money, because it's risky either way. It's risky for everybody. I don't care what you look like. But for someone to build a house and say, we're only gonna make 10 or 15 grand, you have to care about that neighborhood. And because that's all you're gonna make on an affordable home. You're not gonna make a lot of money. So we build 300-400 of them a year, and we're not trying to get rich on one house. You know, we're doing what we love to do, is that's seeing people get a house. And I'm building it the same way I would build a house in Madison. So I don't shortcut. You know, it's even more government oversight on it, because it's a lot of government oversight on those type of houses. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. And like I say, I'm in the business of training contractors. I'm a part of the Minority Contractor Association. I'm a part of the Subcontractor Association, and it's about 80 members in that association. I'm the only African American in that association. I became the president. So, but it doesn't matter. I don't care who you are, what you look like. We like to work. We work with anybody. And so, but we need contractors that don't want to chase the dollar. We need contractors that want to go in the neighborhood and build a house and make $10,000 to $15,000 and be happy.
Thank you. Mr. Vaughn, I'll let you close it out. Oh, I'm sorry, we have some questions? Yeah, absolutely. Who had their hands up online? Can y'all hear me? Ramel Cotton, I see you on the screen. Shout out to Ramel Cotton. That's my boyfriend, y'all. He the one that invited Marco here, and a lot of the people in this room. So shout out to you. Thank you, because he is so important. Okay, well, if y'all can put your question in the chat, and I'll take some time to look at it, and I'll make sure we get those out. Okay, so I'm gonna let Ms. Marone have the last word.
Okay, this has just been incredible. So, I heard several things. My mind is just turning right now. And I'm just looking at out in this audience and just how beautiful we are, y'all. Capacity building, that is a must, right? That's one of the things that I heard, capacity building for our organizations. And for us, when we started in 2018, we were at zero. We never had any intentions of even becoming an organization. We got the funding first. We had an organization that was identified. It didn't work out, so there we were. Chanel and I ended up having it. I also heard the importance of data. In our Leadership Institute, both for our Youth Leadership Institute and also our Community Leadership Institute, one of the courses that we teach is data as a defense. So we put a lot of emphasis and stress on data, but our data has to be strategic because in essence we are the data, right? And data can be used to harm us, right? So just like CRA, if CRA isn't used and monitored, as Josh said, in a proper way, CRA can be used to be a gentrifier. I've seen it. Look at DC, right? So when we talk about census tracts, Josh did reference that, you know, the dynamics of census tracts change. The census tracts are based on what? The census every 10 years. In 10 years' time, what started out in 2000 as an LMI census tract, maybe that gentrification has taken place over those 10 years, and it's not now a census tract. So there's a lot of things that we have to learn, a lot of things that we have to learn how. I believe the systems work only as effective as the people who are engineering those systems, right? Who are engineering. So we have to become the architects of those systems and not the objects of those systems. So I'm hoping Tasha is here. We've got New Orleans in the house, right? We've got Brother Omar came in this morning from Charleston, South Carolina, and he is going to be on the panel and talk about some incredible work that they did around a federal law that's called NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act. And NEPA is very, very, very important. So I guess we're getting ready to start. We're going to take a little break, then we're going to go into the panel discussion, and then we're going to have some lunch, and we're going to get to know one another even better through lunch. And then the last hour that we're going to spend together, maybe we can stay a little longer, the last hour that we're going to spend together, we're going to come up with some actionable strategies that we need to undertake.
Also have a evaluation survey at the end that's going to also help solidify those action steps. Okay, so if you have to slide out, just let me know. I'll be sure to get it to you, but I will make sure everybody does it before you leave. Is that cool? All right. Enjoy your break. Voice clap once. If you can hear my voice, clap 2 times. I still hear people talking. You can hear my voice, clap 2 times. Okay, we're about to start our panel. Can all my panelists come to the front? Everybody wrap up your conversation and get seated. The panel's about to start. Thank you.
Where's Rico and Cassio? Is Cassio here?
Hey.
I'll just pass it.
Okay, we're waiting for Rico. Hi, he said 2 minutes. Okay. Brother Charles. And I think it's Cassio. Is he here? Oh, he needs 2 minutes. Okay. So our panel discussion is the idea and the goal is to give some examples for, first of all, financial institutions, our bank partner, to talk about a little bit about the work that he is doing at Community Bank around community investments. I know we've covered a lot of information, a lot of data, but if you'll recall, we talked about the 3 different areas that financial institutions are tested in, right? One is lending under the HMDA Act, and HMDA stands for the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, so that's on the lending side. And then the community investments. The community investments is more like the projects that Joy demonstrated around the water resistance, but then there's also on the service side where a lot of financial institutions, they love to do financial literacy, right? But that's just one area that we need to look at. For me, as a community and economic development practitioner, I look more at the built environment, bringing housing, affordable housing to our communities. Brother Omar is going to talk about what they've done in Charleston, South Carolina, around affordable housing. So the panel today is we wanted to cover those 3 areas so that we could get an understanding of how banks can work with community groups where they are performing up to our standard, and we can set the standard. We may not reach the standard, but we can set our own standard up on our standard for CRA and what we need and how to meet the needs of our communities. So I don't know where Rico is, but he'll be here. So I'm going to introduce, just to let everybody introduce themselves. So we've got financial institutions at the table. We have philanthropy, because philanthropy plays a major role in this, as Annette said, in this framework for communities, community-centered community and economic development. And then we have what's very, very important in this work is the law, because everything happens under the law when it comes down to community and economic development. So fair housing plays a major role in CED and also in CRA. So Brother Charles Harris, he has the Fair Housing Organization here. He's going to answer some questions on us around that. And then we will wait. Cassio is coming, but we're going to move on. So Tasha, everybody, I'm going to just let everyone stop.
I'm Tasha Pettis-Bonds. I've been in banking primarily for 30 years. I've had the opportunity to go ebb and flow in between bank leadership and non-for-profit leadership. I am based out of St. Louis, Missouri, but I've worked within Missouri, Colorado, Texas, California, Illinois, in different capacities within banks. And I've also worked with CDFIs, which are non-traditional bank lending.
Good afternoon, my name is Jai Keaton. I am now the Director of Strategic Initiatives with One Voice. I transitioned into this role after serving in Directorship of Planning and Development, Economic Development for the City of Jackson for about 5 years.
Good afternoon, everyone. Omar Muhammad. I was the former Executive Director of a nonprofit in North Charleston, primarily focused on revitalization of 7 communities. I'll be talking about that today. I do have a background in city planning.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Harris. I'm with a housing organization here in Jackson called Housing Education Economic Development, and our acronym is HEED, and we are a certified comprehensive housing counseling agency, and we are also a statewide fair housing agency.
So we're going to start out with some questions. We have, we talked and we've been educated on the Community Reinvestment Act. And now we want to talk about those essential stakeholders that are needed in order to lay out a framework around comprehensive community-centered community and economic development. So I'm going to start out with asking Brother Omar a question around the work that, the incredible work that you accomplished with in Charleston, South Carolina, and how you used a federal law in order to bring that work about and what came out of that.
All right, so thank you. So that national law that Ramona is referring to is called the, it's NEPA for short, but it is the National Environmental Protection Act. And it is an act that is under threat. The Trump administration during their first term tried to lower the criteria for developers and who fall under NEPA, lower those criteria. And it is under threat again with the, with the Trump administration again. But this is one of the most powerful federal acts that are out there. It is less known and it is less used. So any project that has federal dollars tied to it falls under the NEPA criteria. They have to do an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement, particularly if they're impacting waterways, rivers, wetlands. You can tie NEPA into those projects. It ties them to be doing specific assessments. And we were able to use that law. Actually, we're the first organization to be able to use the NEPA law for community-based and focused mitigation. That we use that funding. And here we go with relationships, right? Relationships in the community, because we knew in total we were able to negotiate a total of $8 million for across 7 communities. $8 million is not a lot of money when you're talking about revitalizing 7 low-wealth communities that have a host of different challenges, economic, housing. That can fit in one bucket alone. Education, we try to address a holistic approach in communities. So we use this act to negotiate the terms for mitigation, because the project is going to have adverse impacts on our communities. We then, because we recognize that $8 million is not going to last long, particularly, now I'm going to be quite frank with us. Usually our nonprofits come about because we're trying to address something immediately. We don't have time to sit around and structure an organization, put the policies together, put this, the right structure in place, because we are immediately trying to address the alligator in the boat, right? Immediately. So we were in that situation, right, where we were going to be allocated this $8 million, be responsible for managing and stewarding this $8 million, and we had no infrastructure. No infrastructure at all. So that meant that we had to align ourselves with partners. The city of North Charleston, foundations, etc. So we took that money, right, and we used those relationships to establish endowments, revolving funds, other ways in which we could turn this $8 million into more. Right? And we were able to leverage this $8 million, and right now it is doubled, right? So in the coffers we have $16 million because we have been able to build affordable housing, we have been able to award scholarships, we have been able to loan out microloans to small businesses, we provide technical assistance, etc. for contractors, right? Because one of the mitigating pieces was they were removing a recreational center from our community, so they had to build that back, right? That was not included in the original 8 million. This was something totally different. So one of the things we did was prioritize and made it as a condition of replacing the recreation center that minority contractors had to be awarded contracts to rebuild this recreation center. What we realized early in that process that a lot of our minority contractors, they don't have the bonding, they don't have the insurance, they don't have the business structure to be able to run a net 30, all these types of challenges. So we, along, accompanying that program, we also developed a technical assistance program to build the capacity of those minority firms to win those contracts. We also made it a requirement, right, as part of that mitigation, we made it a requirement that at the time it's the Port Authority, right? So the Port Authority is a funny animal. When they want to, they'll function as a private entity when they want to say no to something, right? The community is asking for something, you need to give us this, you need to fund this, and they will say no. We're a private entity, we're not responsible for doing X, right? But when they need funding for their capital improvement or their infrastructure improvement, then they function as a state agency where they can get state appropriated funds, right? So they are a real funny animal to deal with, but you have to navigate those circumstances. But that's basically what we were able to do. That's the law that we were able to establish. And the monies that we have been able to have endowed will outlive all of us. They will be around. And the way that we establish this, because we know how funny we are, right? When money comes to us, we don't trust. We question everything. When we let a contract to someone, they don't want to do the right thing. They don't want to give us financials. It's a struggle. It's a struggle with us. Right, so we went through all of these types of challenges, but the one thing that we did was we wanted this money to last for perpetuity. So regardless, I'm no longer with the organization, but regardless of whoever is running that organization, who's on the board, they can never change the conditions in the structure of the endowments. That money will forever be allocated to those 7 communities for those specific purposes: for housing, economic development, education, and environmental justice, right? Doing the research necessary to collect the data to inform your work.
So Brother Omar talked about partnerships and relationships that they built, because the community itself, even though these they won this incredible case around NEPA and set a precedent, something that we have used in our challenge of the One Lake Plan with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I reached out to Brother Omar because they had the experience working around NEPA. And I knew NEPA, but I didn't know it to the extent and the practicality of it. And so we used NEPA in order to challenge and to fight back, to give communities some leverage around this One Lake Plan that, which is nothing but an urban renewal plan, and everybody really needs to know what this thing is, right? And we're going to do a lot of code. So anyway, Brother Omar talked about the relationships. Relationships are everything in this work. Building trusted relationships. And one of the things that I would like to note, so Omar, we're using you as our case study today. One of the things that I would like to know was, who were the partners that you reached out to and you engaged with? Were financial institutions involved? because now you've grown the endowment to be double what it was initially. So that means that some blending and some leveraging has taken place. So how did you use those funds in order to build? Because that's one of the things that we want this to move into, to give a really clear understanding of how we use leveraging and layering in order to bring about, to make projects happen.
So, I think I can talk without the mic. Y'all can hear me, right? No, you can. All right, so, one thing we had to learn early on is that sometimes we have to work with people we may not like. A lot of times. We have to work with people that we may not stand to be in the room with, right? But they can open a door, right, to another conversation that you need to have. They can open that door that you can, right? So the first thing we had to do was we had to come up with a vision for the community, right? Because we were dealing with 7 communities. Originally, we reached out to over 30 communities because, this is a port facility with intermodal infrastructure, etc. So it just wasn't going to be affecting those adjacent communities, but communities where those trains are going to be running through. So we reached out to many more communities. I think it was like a total of 45 communities total. African American, low wealth communities, and only 7 came to the table to work together, right? Why? Because we lack trust in each other. I'm going to use a term here. Those Negroes are never going to get these white folk to give them any money to address their challenges in their community was one of the number one things we kept hearing, and why they couldn't come to the table. Right? But 7 communities came to the table, wanted to work together. The first thing we had to do was create a shared vision. Because when you don't have that shared vision, it's easy for them to pick you off. Because the power structure doesn't want to change. It doesn't want to shift. It doesn't want to give you the resources to improve your communities. So they're gonna push back on any attempt to get those resources in your community. They're gonna tell you whatever to get you out of their face, right? So that was the first thing we had to do, was to get everybody on the same page on a shared vision. And then we had to bring consultants in, right, to build us or develop with the community, with a series of focus groups, workshops, charrettes, conversations, right, around a revitalization plan, right? Originally, the city of North Charleston wanted to call it a master plan. The community didn't like that word. Master plan, right? So we changed it to revitalization plan. So it was a community revitalization plan. Once the community had that vision, then we started to work the plan, right? That meant then bringing in additional partners. The city of North Charleston originally was a partner, right, to us, but they became a foe. And they became a foe because we wanted to have more control in directing where those monies went. The city had the idea, oh yeah, we'll let them think that they control the money, but we're going to take this money from this organization and these people. We fought the city 3 years to get our money from the city of North Charleston into this foundation. 3 years. 3 years we fought the city. It was a tremendous effort to do that. We had to really combat other organizations that were trying to infiltrate our organization and undermine. They ran off with our books, with our financials, secretary report. I mean, it was a real challenge. It really was. Because of the amount of money we were dealing with, people just wanted to take it and do whatever they wanted to do, right? And our communities were sick and tired of money going to organizations or even going to the city, and those monies not coming to the communities that they were allocated for. So that's how LAMC, the Low Country Alliance for Model Communities, kind of grew out of that frustration of the need of an organization that will be accountable, be representative to the community, and push back, right, with consequences, right? Because we put our privilege on the line. I'll just be honest. We did. We put our reputation. It was hell. It was hell.
So we're going to kind of pivot a little bit and talk about, now that we have identified a case study, and I think that we can kind of associate what Brother Omar shared, what he and his communities, what they faced, and we can kind of overlay that with things that happen here in our communities, because we face a lot of those same issues. But we want to look at how we can proactively change things. And one of them is bringing all of those partners that he talked about, putting together a framework and an infrastructure for community-centered community and economic development, because that's what they did. They did a community-centered community and economic development. And philanthropy plays a big role in that wheel, right? And so we have, in fact, it is because of philanthropy, the Mississippi, the Mid-South Foundation, Foundation for the Mid-South. That we were able to put on this event. And I have known Greg Johnson, who is the president and CEO of the foundation. In fact, it is Greg Johnson who is the reason why I'm in Mississippi, because I was recruited here to replace him on an organization that he was going out of. And he couldn't be with us today, but he sent his assistant program officer, Cassio, and he's going to talk about what the foundation does and some exciting work that they're going to be doing around community-centered community and economic development.
Good afternoon. Thank you all. Cassio Batiste, I serve as VP of Programs for the Foundation for the Mid-South. So just kind of allow you, give you a little bit of information on the foundation. We're a unique community foundation. Most community foundations serve a certain county or a certain region. Well, we serve 4 regions in 3 different states. So Jackson and the Delta region of Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. So our work is very, very broad. But in those, our priority areas is education, health, and economic opportunities. So those are our 3 priority areas. And so looking at the work in Mississippi in general, one of the things that we said with our strategic plan was we wanted to be a thought partner and a convener for a community. Because most community foundations, I know you all, we was talking a lot about banks and financial institutions. And I'm going to say this to you all, there's a piece of financial resources that communities are not tapping into, and those are your community foundations, right? Mississippi has 9. And I'm going to get myself in trouble for saying it, but I'm going to say it anyway. And those 9 community foundations, they manage over $600 million. Okay? Now, some of that is in donor advised funds, so some of those are really restricted resources. But so we're saying for Mississippi, a community foundation, we got 9 community foundations that manage those types of money, right? But I will say this. The Foundation for the Mid-South, we're the only community foundation that's willing to be in rooms and connect and be a thought partner for organizations. So I'll share one of the things that we've been doing for the last 6 months. So in April of last year, there was a National Funders meeting. And after that National Funders meeting that Kellogg hosted, they said that, hey, there are some things that, they did a report, and they said, this is why we don't fund in Mississippi, right? So, also, for every $1,000 that comes to the South, how much do y'all think Mississippi gets? Just throw a number out. $50, $10, $3. So for every $1,000 that come, philanthropy dollars that come to the South, Mississippi gets $3. Now, how much do y'all think black organizations get? I'm just gonna leave that at that. So if Mississippi get $3,
We get 50
is that right? So from that meeting, what the foundation, what we did was we said, okay, so the 4 areas that they talked about was organizations not having leadership and the capacity to manage the money, right? Collaboration. Organizations are not, there was no clear outline of collaboration when it came to organizations. And in that meeting, we had some organizations say, well, what if our mission don't align, right? So this is what I had to propose to them. If we want a more financial healthy Mississippi, if you're working with students in high school, helping them get a career path, if you're working with banks, if you're working with mothers, single mothers who you're helping them get jobs, our mission aligned because out of all of that, we want a healthy financial Mississippi, right? So that's one of the things. And then the last one was advocacy and policy. How do we get organizations to affect policy? Because a lot of nonprofits will say, I can't lobby. Well, that's not lobbying, but you need to learn how to advocate for yourself. So with that, we took on that bulk of the work. And we're still doing that work. We're working with about 40 nonprofits across Mississippi. We're at our last meeting. Asia's been in there, and I see a few other people that's been part of that. So that is what we're doing as a community foundation to build out that strategy, because one of the things they said was Mississippi don't have a strategy. So if we don't have a strategy, going back to it, if you don't have a plan, then how do you know where it's at? So that's what we're doing. And I'll leave with this. So part of that too is Asset Funders Network. There's a National Asset Funders Network. Louisiana has one, Memphis has one, Arkansas has one, I think Birmingham has one, Alabama has, everyone has one except Mississippi. So I went to my CEO and I said, hey, I want to bring the Asset Funders Network to Mississippi. Our CEO was gracious enough, yes, we're going to do the work. Instead of us, so how do the Funders Network work is you have to get organizations and institutions together to raise the money to start the network. Well, our CEO said, no, we don't have time to do that. We're going to put in our budget to develop this Asset Funders Network. Now, ongoing, we'll continue to bring in institutions to do that. But the work that we're doing at the foundation, we're going to bring the first Asset Funders Network to Mississippi. So we're going to need, and so what does that look like? It looks like this. Having financial institutions at the table, having nonprofits at the table, having community people at the table. And it's going to be led by us as a philanthropy organization, because we can also tap in other resources from other funders. So I would say look out for that. The work that you all are doing, my heart is smiling because y'all have already done the work for me. I just need the contact from this meeting so I can invite y'all to our first Asset Funders Network.
That's beautiful, and you know we're there. Yeah. You know we're there. So, as we are creating this vision of our framework for community-centered community and economic development and putting that foundation in place, because the foundation is very, very important. We talked about philanthropy. We have a community model, that a case study on the community and what that could look like, in a scenario here in Jackson. And we briefly spoke to how we use policy and laws, and we're going to get into that just a little bit more. And that's where Brother Charles is going to talk about fair housing and fair lending. But we're going to talk about financial institutions because they are the center of the work, especially from a CRA perspective. And I have had the privilege of working with Rico Wells since we first started this work. He was with State Bank and Trust then. And Rico, I can't even remember how we met, but I just know we met. And I said, I need you on my board. And he accepted. And he was on our founding board. But Rico has since left that State Bank was, talk about mergers, was purchased by Bank Plus. And he was with Bank Plus for a while. And now he is with Community Bank. And Community Bank is really living up to its name, Community. So I want Rico to talk a little bit about, Rico, I know that you all have done some incredible work and have been very intentional since you have been the CRA director for Community Bank. And you've been very intentional to build out the bank's CRA performance. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about what the bank does, but also what the challenges you all face in doing your work and doing it better.
I've worked in this community for a long time, and Ramona has made it really, really tough for me to sit here by Mr. Harris, because Mr. Harris has asked me for the last 6 years, 10 years, to be a part of his conference every year, whether to be a speaker on a panel or what have you, and I always say no. And I say no because I always tell Mr. Harris, I'm not ready yet, Mr. Harris. I'm just not ready yet. And here I am sitting here today by Mr. Harris. So you've made it really tough. I am really more of a worker and a doer. I'm gonna give you a little bit of my background. I've only been in banking about 10 years. I started working in this community at Jackson Housing Authority. I'm a social worker by trade. And so don't ask me how I got into banking, but I started with the Housing Authority and working with a lot of financial institutions, Cadence, Bank Plus, and they were really, really, really for as good to me and good to Jackson Housing Authority and helping us do some great things for us in the community because we were the only HUD-approved housing counseling agency that was a housing authority within the state of Mississippi. Transition all the way up to now, 10 years for us in banking. This is my third year with Community Bank, and I'm the CRA officer for Community Bank. When we talk about challenges, and I said this for us in my group earlier, a lot of our affordable housing groups have dried up. A lot of our affordable housing groups have dried up. A lot of groups that we have worked with in the past have dried up. Those groups that do service, when I say service, I'm talking about financial literacy, educating individuals about affordable housing, about their credit. Those are the things that we're looking for, and they're hard to find. And so if you do that work, please, 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 when I get off this panel, make sure you get my email, I get your email, because those are the groups that that's what we're looking for, okay? Other challenges is that you want to make sure that when you say, okay, I want to work with a financial institution, that you kind of know the goal of the bank and what we're gonna be doing in the next 10 years or the next 5 years or what have you. Raise your hand if you know what an assessment area is. Okay. Nonprofits, you need to know what an assessment area is. All banks have an assessment area. Community Bank has 17. 17. And there are the counties or the MSAs where that bank has branches or offices. You want to find out all these little things before you even meet with the bank. Find all these little nuances out and find out the strategy of the bank before. Working with a bank, you have to be strategic in what you're trying to do. Be strategic in what you're trying to do. Line your goals up for as with the bank and vice versa. So it can be a great working relationship. What's the other part of that question, Ramona? I know it was the challenges. And some of the things that we wind up doing, we have created different products to lean in for as to the LMI, for as community. Now, I will tell you this here. CRA has nothing to do with color. It has nothing to do with color. First myth. Second myth. What about that CRA money? What is CRA money? What is that? Well, you're the officer, you should be able to write a check. I don't have a budget. I'm always looking to work with organizations that want to work with me, especially if you're in the assessment area. I want to know what you wind up doing and how you're doing it. I definitely want to serve on your board. Now, there are two reasons why I want to serve on your board. Yes, for service, as well as to help you. It's another thing that sometimes get misconstrued. We love to do TA, technical assistance. And when you're serving on a board, that's what you should be doing, technical assistance. Making sure that that organization files their taxes on time, making sure that they're ready to, when a grant opportunity comes, that their organization is ready, not have to get ready for it. So using the resource you have for us in that banker that's serving on that board is very, very, very important.
And what type of products do, briefly, because we need to move forward, what type of products does the bank offer in your lending capacity? Because banks are examined through their lending practices. That's one of the assessment areas that they are. So what kind of products do you all have for first-time home buyers?
Well,
what are your credit, what are your credit, what are your underwriting criteria?
the number one thing, we partner for as with organizations like Federal Home Loan Bank and offer grants to first-time home buyers. Right now, they have a grant up to $20,000. Now, these dollars go real fast, okay? And you definitely can layer different dollars. A lot of those dollars have dried up as well. But Federal Home Loan Bank is one of the organizations that continue to put out money for us in the community. And organizations, nonprofits, you have to partner for as with a financial institution that's a member of Federal Home Loan Bank to even apply for those type of grants as well. That's another thing that I get a lot of calls on too. Organizations see those grants out there with Federal Home Loan Bank and they call me one day before the grant is due. And then when you say, well, you know, I want to meet you, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do that, then it's like, well, you don't want to help me. I don't even know what your organization does. Okay? One of the things that community and sometimes people don't think about is the reputation of the bank too. I mentioned this for us in the group.
Yeah, I'm always vetting organizations. I want to know that you're solid, okay? I want to know that you're solid. Because I don't want to align the bank for us with an organization that's not solid.
So that goes along with that capacity building that we talked about
Yes.
earlier and providing the technical assistance.
Yes.
MCAP, one of the things that we've done and we've been working on over the last 10 years now, we'll be 10 years old next month, over the last 10 years is doing exactly that, building our capacity so that we are competitive. And so now we are technical assistance providers.
Yes.
To nonprofit organizations, and that's something that we're going to talk about in the last arm. So we've talked about philanthropy, the role that it plays. We talked about financial institutions and the role.
Can I say one thing? Another thing that sometimes people don't know, some financial institutions have foundations too.
Yes.
Some financial institutions have foundations too. And if you have a relationship with a CRA officer or anybody for us at the bank, ask those questions too. Ask those questions, because that's another avenue for a nonprofit to ask for funds, especially if it aligns for us with the foundation and what the foundation goals are. That's a whole nother pot of money that you may have access to based on the relationship. I heard something earlier, I think Kimberly wound up saying it. When I say relationship, now, I'll give you an example. I'm with Community Bank. The bank come in, we meet, we start a relationship, we do some TA, we do all these different things for us with this organization.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. So we have some few diabetics in the room that need to go ahead and eat.
Yes.
So please, if you need to eat right now, go ahead and line up and get your food. You can get your food and sit down and we can still talk, okay? So for those who need to eat right now, please go ahead and do so. Thank you.
I always ask, when we say work together, for as, yes, a working relationship, but one thing that some banks may not ask, but I will hope that you really hear me when I say this. Where are your accounts? Where are your accounts? You're asking me for an annual donation, and I want to give it to you, but your accounts are somewhere else. So you don't think enough of the bank to even let the bank, hold your dollars, but you want the bank to give you dollars. And so all these things that I encourage nonprofits, make sure you take a look at these things, prior to. And if you already have a working relationship for us with the bank, you can always say, Rico, or you said that guy from Community Bank pointed out these certain things here, and give me some more advice on, how to seek funding and when to seek funding. You can ask myself, ask Chandra, ask David, when is your fiscal year? When do you all give out dollars? When do you all get a budget to do something? When do you all,
And we're going to do more of that, get more dive down in the weeds, more around the system as we have more training are going to come. So we want to close out, our next piece will be, what does a CRA or a community investment project look like, right? Yes, what does an actual project look like? Because we want to give financial institutions the opportunity to improve on their community investment side of the prong of CRA. And Brother Jahai Keaton is here, and One Voice is working on a very exciting project that we are also excited about, the Marshall School that was closed, and it would be an excellent CRA project, and it would also be very excellent because it is about resiliency, what Joy talked about earlier. So, brother, it's on you, brother. And I'm gonna talk about ours too.
Well, thank you. So as Ms. Ramona said, we have engaged with acquiring, we being One Voice, have engaged in acquiring Marshall Elementary School, which was closed for about 3 or 4 years. It was a part of Jackson Public Schools repurposing project, which JPS had to close about 19 schools within the last 2 years. And the conception of the Resiliency Hub came out of a year-long, if you want to call it peer learning group funded by Bloomberg Philanthropy while I was at the city of Jackson. And we realized this work came after the water crisis of course, preceding or proceeding COVID. And the nature of the group conversation was based around how do we assist our LMI communities with access to resources, right? So when we have these emergency situations or crisis situations, how do we get resources to the community and vice versa? How do we create an area for the community to come whenever we have philanthropy or other organizations that need to stage support services or supplies? So that was the inception of the Resiliency Project. This is my first time talking about this publicly. I normally wouldn't read, but I didn't want to misrepresent what we put together, so I'm going to read a brief project description just to not mix anything. The Marshall Community Resiliency Hub is a transformative $10 million adaptive reuse project located in South Jackson, Mississippi. The initiative repurposes a former elementary school into a multifunctional community hub designed to expand access to opportunity, strengthen economic mobility, and stabilize the surrounding neighborhood. The campus will serve as a central, daily use resource for residents by integrating workforce development, small business incubation, health and wellness services, and community programming under one roof. By bringing these elements together in a single, accessible location, South Jackson rocks. That's my first time saying the name. You don't like that? Yeah, okay. All right, cool. The Marshall Project. The Marshall Project creates a platform where individuals, families, and entrepreneurs can build skills, launch ventures, and improve their overall quality of life. More than a redevelopment project, the Marshall Project is designed as a long-term civic infrastructure, anchoring the community, catalyzing additional investment, and creating measurable, sustained impact for generations to come. I got a few high-level talking points. This is a civic infrastructure, not just real estate. Focused on long-term economic mobility and neighborhood stabilization, strong CRA alignment, serving the LMI community and supporting community development, economic opportunity, and revitalization, multi-layered impact, combining workforce development, small business incubation, access to services, flexible entry points for banks, including lending investment and CRA qualified grants, de-risked through partnerships, blending philanthropy, public support, and earned revenue, place-based strategy, anchoring revitalization in South Jackson, catalyzing broader investment, and measurable outcomes, tracking jobs created, businesses supported, and households served. So to date, we have secured $1 million from the Packer Foundation. We use that to acquire the facility and to complete pre-development. We just got our architectural design documents done with cost estimates that now we'll be sending out to GCs. So we are at a point, that's why I took this engagement to begin to have conversations about our capital stack and how we begin to fundraise primarily through philanthropy, but we will need some traditional debt there, and I know that there's opportunity for new market tax credits as well. So I'm open to all of those conversations, and I appreciate you for having us.
And I am going to just talk just a little bit briefly because we are behind and not everybody's ready to eat because I am too. And I just want to thank you for your patience. Just a little bit about the work that we're doing in Duck Hill. We are converting the community house. Well, we've been working on readapting a beautiful historic high school called the Benford High School. And it has been closed for about 25 years, and we got in 2022, we got it designated as a brownfields project. So we're working on, we've already gone through the visioning and the pre-development part and everything like that. We were fortunate to get a lot of pre-development work done by at Region 4 EPA at that time. And so it didn't cost us to get the renditions, the drawings and all of that. Unfortunately, those resources aren't available to us now. So now we are in the actual moving towards the financing and stabilizing the building. We do have to put a new roof on it. We got to get that done immediately. That's what I want to talk to you about, brother. Get that done immediately. And then we are moving into our creative financing for that. We also, during the winter storm in January, the town of Duck Hill lost power for 11 days. And the town leadership, Vice Mayor Everett, we immediately responded and converted. They have a community house there, a really nice place. And we converted it into a warming center. And last week, on last Thursday, we submitted in partnership with Columbia University, it's called a CASI application in order to retrofit the building because it really wasn't ready to be a warming center, and it is going to be a resilience hub. And Brother Omar worked with us on that project. So that's just some of the CRA eligible projects that we have in the making to move forward on. The reason why we were able to respond as quickly as we did is because we have been going through this and putting that infrastructure like in 2021, I think. 2021. We went through an assessment, a climate assessment. So Duck Hill actually has a local foods, local places, because one of the things that came out was they were a food desert, right? So we have a local foods, local places plan. We have a climate adaptation and resiliency and preparedness plan. So we were ready to move forward, to act quickly. Planning is so important. I know that people get tired of it, but I tell you, you got to have it. You just have to do it. So now we are working to share that model and that work with other communities, and especially here in the city of Jackson where I live, that we deal with flooding and everything like that. And we are going to be having some more sessions around this proposed One Lake plan. They're not calling it One Lake anymore because One Lake has been branded so badly. But that proposed plan, and that was another reason why we wanted to hold this convening, because community needs to be ready to put our input in, talk about those community benefits agreements. You know, what do we want to see and what are we going to get out of this? And we got to be ready. So I'm going to let Brother Charles, I'm going to let him close us out, just talk a little bit about fair housing and just a little bit about fair housing because it's very, very important, especially now that they're talking about all of this blighting, right? We got to be real careful here, y'all. Real careful. When they start talking about blighting, they're talking about urban renewal, okay? So we're going to have some serious conversations about what's going on in the city of Jackson and what we need to do in order to defend and protect our communities. Because when they come in and they blight an area, they can't just blight an area. They have to declare that area an urban renewal district. Well, guess what? Everything that's inside of that urban renewal area, it is not blighted. That reduces your property value. So we got a lot of discussions to have. So next month, April, is National Fair Housing Month, and I'm going to let Brother Charles close us out on that.
Thank you, Ramona. I'm going to give a disclaimer. First of all, I was sitting in the audience. I wasn't planning. I had no intention I was going to be here. Like someone said last night, you can't turn Ramona down, so she dragged me up here. She said I wouldn't have to pay for my meal, and I said it sounds like a good deal. You know, we're talking about fair housing, as a former history teacher, you know, you have to know where you've been in order to know where you're going. So fair housing has a history. Now, I'm gonna give you a little history of fair housing and redlining. I'm going to be brief. Now, this mess that we are in, first of all, Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968.
Right.
Okay, and I got a question for you at the end. And as far as fair housing is concerned, and as far as redlining is concerned, I'm going to give the banks a break, which means that the banks was not the cause of redlining. The banks did not start redlining. The government started redlining. The government got us in this mess, and guess what? The government fund Fair Housing Act hours to do what? To get them out of this mess. And so that's why we are a certified fair housing agency, you see. In regard to what Rico said earlier, that fair housing has nothing to do with race per se. See, I'm not fair housing, CRA. CRA was passed in 1977 by President Carter, and it was dealing with low to moderate area was not being granted loans. And over a period of time, then redlining pretty much continued to exist. How did the government get involved? Back in the 1930s, the government was mandated any developer that made a loan or requested a loan to develop a black neighborhood would not be granted a loan. And certain, I didn't care where it was, in New York, New Jersey, all over particular places, and they went to court. And they said, well, this is a state deal, not a federal deal. So they was told not to make loans in certain areas. In Latonia, other part of New York, throughout the United States, where these individuals were told not to make loans, and they followed the government rule. Over a period of time, not only were they denied making or told not to make FHA loan, other financial institutions said, well, if the FHA was told not to do it, and the government told them not to do it, so why don't we follow suit? And so all banks, all very type of lending institutions began to follow that lawsuit, and that particular practice for not to make loans in those particular areas. That was mandated. You couldn't develop a house, you couldn't make loans, and not only that, blacks could not live in a particular neighborhood. There was a covenant out. That only reason a black person could live be in a particular neighborhood if they were servant of the people that they worked for. Okay? And so all of this is somewhat at the beginning of our, I'm trying to cut it short, of fair housing. So which in 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King went to Congress for years. He called it the Open House Bill. He was a pre-runner of the fair housing law. He asked Congress many enough times if they would pass an open house law where individuals could live wherever he chose to live. And for years, Congress did what? Put it on the back burner. So, put it on the back burner. So the first fair housing law was passed in 1866. In 1866, I forgot what amendment it was, stated that any male have the right to negotiate, to sell, or review a contract. So which means that blacks had just been free for a year, which were freed in 1865. And this particular amendment came out in 1866. So it wasn't that they were looking out for blacks, it was just that they said all male, because they felt that blacks would never become homeowner or property owner. But they had that right at this particular time. So that is when the beginning really of the first Civil Rights and Fair Housing Act. So that was passed in 1866. So from 1866 up until 1968, 102 years. You see, at all points, they didn't teach us how to read, but they taught us how to count. and so 102 years before the Fair Housing Act was passed. Back to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You know, every year we have the celebration of Dr. King. All the celebration, all the attribute and contribution that he did. we would hear a lot of people announce those. But none of you really have heard, it happened every year though, about because of him, the Fair Housing Act was passed. So April the 4th, 1968, after Dr. King had gone to Congress for years, asking that the Fair Housing Law become adopted, they said no. So on April the 4th, Dr. Martin Luther King was what? Assassinated. See, I was gonna give, that was the bones I was gonna give you my meal, if someone had answered that question. So April the 4th, Dr. King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. April the 10th, President Lyndon Johnson called Congress together, which they was already in session anyway. And they passed the Fair Housing, they got together on April the 10th. And it was passed on April the 11th, 1968. So we went 102 years without a Fair Housing Act. During that particular time, if an individual, citizen New York, other place, coalition got together and went to the Supreme Court, went to various court asking for fair housing protection. They were denied housing. But every court followed the other state court, which said that this is a what? This is a state problem, not a federal problem. So which means the state didn't have a law, therefore what? The federal, it wasn't a federal law at all. So it did not become a federal law up until 1968. And April 11 of 1968, April was described, set aside to become Fair Housing Month. So each year, our agency, we provide a fair housing, fair lending conference every year. You see, and that's the beginning of the Fair Housing Act. So which means that we're talking about redlining. So you see redlining began in 1930 by the government. So how it affects, see how fair housing is involved, although it does not deal with color, but it was told to make loans in low to moderate community. And fair housing get involved when it comes to redlining. And then Josh explained what redlining is this morning. And that's the part that fair housing. So when we do testing of banks for lending discrimination, this is how we know what particular neighborhood, what bank, or what is doing lending discrimination, you see. As Josh stated, some of this is, you can get the information from the HMDA report. But we have a methodology, and other fair housing institutions nationwide has a way of doing testing.
So for fair housing, I know you're gonna be getting out, so we'll get it out to everybody when Fair Housing Week is. So
April 28th through the 24th at the Hilton.
Yes. And we'll make sure everybody gets that. And Tasha's going to just officially close us out so that we can don't take too much time, have a little time for the draft on CDFI and the role that she's playing and the role that CDFI is playing in this overall strategy.
I won't take too long because I know I'm what's holding you up between now and your meal. So I've been in traditional banking for the majority of my career, and I've taken 2 different steps over into the CDFI space. And one of the things that I'm charged with within our CDFI is really tying together the work that we're doing outside to make sure it's matching and makes sense inside. And I'll explain a little bit about what I mean. So the CDFI that I work for, do you guys know what CDFI stands for, right? No. Community Development Financial Institution. So they are organizations that you go to for housing assistance, or some of them are strictly small business lenders. So they do things that a traditional bank won't do. That's what what our organization does, is small business support. So when I first got to the organization, I recognized several gaps that existed. One being the products and services that we were offering did not necessarily match the community that we serve through our mission statement, which is Black, Brown, and Underserved. So I started kind of challenging that. The second piece I noticed was that we really weren't going out to market into those communities. We said that we wanted to reach Black and Brown, but I noticed that the majority of our applications that were coming in were from white business owners who had access to Google, and they were sitting in different rooms, so we weren't doing a good enough job at community outreach. The third thing I noticed was that our credit criteria did not meet the needs that our community needed. As a CDFI, it's important that you are able to have some tools and resources that assist people in getting to where they need to be. But then once you get them there, you need to be able to actually do the loans that they, that you say that you're focused on doing. So now the role that I have within, so before you try to convince an organization that they're doing things wrong, you have to understand what they are doing, what those gaps are, but then present the solution. So I sat back for a full year and watched the data just come out, because sometimes when you're talking to leaders, it's not just what you're saying. They threw away my 30-year banking background, like she doesn't know anything, she's with our new organization. But what I wanted to do is just take a step back and let the data do the speaking for itself. We had over 2,000 loan applications. We'd only approved 144 of those. And we had a very small, I refuse to say the number in this room, an extremely small number of those that were Black and brown. And so now the role that I'm in within this organization, after 4 months of writing a new role and pushing it back to the CEO and COO, and just kept pushing it back to them until they finally sat down and said, tell us what it is you want to do. And I told them I wanted to be able to build systems from the beginning to the end. So not just taking a look and saying, okay, now all of a sudden we need to go and market in the Black and brown communities. No, let's take a look at everything around our application and what we're asking people. So financial education is critical, the technical assistance piece, so I'm writing out all of our curriculum around technical assistance. But more important than that, I'm actually making it where it's something that they can understand. So it's not from the lens of, nothing against anyone in the room. It's not your white, rosy, big words. It is Tasha being from the Black and brown community, talking to Black and brown people in a language that they understand about right and wrong, and not being ashamed when I say, now girl, you know that ain't the right thing for you to be doing. They understand it, right? So I'm really focused on building the curriculum that they're going to understand, but then that they actually can be connected to, so that they can then do the work. Because one thing I told my leaders, the Black and brown people I want to do business with, they don't like handouts. They really want to understand and give them the education, and then let them do, and let them grow, and let them figure it out on their own, but with us right there behind them, guiding them when they're getting off track. So I really helped build out this work. What I'm working on is building out our business support services department within the organization, community outreach. So the reputation, needless to say, within the community, primarily where we're headquartered, is that we don't do any lending within Black and brown. So we can turn our backs as Black folks on those who we will not let them in if they do us wrong. So I have been spending the last month in Kansas City knocking down those doors, beating down those barriers, and thank God I have won 3 major relationships within my first month in that role. But it's, you build that respect and trust with them. So that's another thing I'm challenging the organization to, is if we want to say Black and brown, we've got to get down and go into Black and brown and hold their hand and be right there in the trenches with them, so that we can help them get out of whatever they're stuck in. So one of the things that we're not doing right away, we're not going to go in and all of a sudden change our credit criteria. One of the things we're working to do is make it more flexible, so that we can make sure that when we're doing the financial education, we're moving them into the space that we need them to be in. Because what we don't want to do is just start throwing the money out the door and saying, okay, you went through the courses, let me give you the money. But we still haven't built enough strength within you to actually manage the money, to manage the projects, etc. So I know that my next year is going to be extremely busy, but it's what I've committed my 30 years to being, is that person who's intentional, who's purposeful in my actions, and who's going to challenge leadership, but help leadership understand that you got to trust me to do the work that I was hired to do, because you're going to look good in the end, and we're going to all look good, but more importantly, the community is going to start looking better.
Okay, we have the patience of Job. Now we are going to close out our panel section. We're going to have some food, and then we're going to come back. Can we just kind of like eat through? Can we eat and talk at the same time? And then we can. But I'm a diabetic too, so my blood sugar is low right now. And I just want to thank you for your patience and for your tenacity and sticking here and tolerance for our shortcomings. We're going to always work towards getting and being better at this. So can, who do we have to bless the food? Any volunteers to bless the food? Okay. This is one of our students. Come bless the food, honey. This is Jataya.
Can we bow our heads? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for letting us come together another day. Thank you for waking us up. Thank you for just providing us with food and let this food be a nourishment to our bodies. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Jataya.
So as you guys are eating, as you get a moment, I have created an evaluation. I put the QR code up here, so scan it as you get a chance and fill that out. That'd be greatly appreciated. And thank you guys in the chat that I've already dropped the link for y'all, so y'all just go ahead and complete that at your leisure. I think I've already got one response, so please take the time to complete that survey. Thanks.
Good.